It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think we might pause that conversation about so-called guppies, grown-up professionals who have given up on owning property, and turn our attention instead to that story that you just heard in the news. I mean, you know, I know he's made all his promises and all of that, and the latest is that we'll join Russia and Belarus as non-signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights. So, should we just pause for a minute and reflect once again upon how far and how fast we have fallen as a country? Conservative Party now suggesting they might campaign on a pledge to follow Belarus and Russia out of the European Convention of Human Rights. I don't actually know. I mean, can you get chucked out, or do you have to actually withdraw? I presume you can get chucked out, but that is now, and I think it also imperils the Good Friday Agreement, but you won't hear that in any right-wing newspapers. You won't read that. The people that brought you Brexit, and you remember what they promised you, will also try to sell you the withdrawal from the European Convention on Human Rights without mentioning the Good Friday Agreement or the fact that it would make us the ethical equivalent of Vladimir Putin. That's where they are now, because they have to keep finding stuff to tell you is ruining your life or ruining your country. They've been in charge for 13 years and they are literally running out of scapegoats, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. They are running out of scapegoats because Brussels was the best. I wonder whether any of them sit there thinking, oh, damn, we should never have left the European Union. If only David Cameron had never called that blasted referendum, we could still be blaming Brussels for everything. It was never true, but that doesn't matter. We're conservatives. Our politics isn't about telling people the truth. It's about telling them whatever we need to tell them to leave the status quo in place. So they carry on doffing their caps and we carry on transferring 29 million quid PPE contracts or getting seats in the House of Lords in return for diddly squat. Isn't that incredible? The scapegoat. So Brussels was such a brilliant scapegoat for so long. And it's gone now. They simply can't do it. They occasionally have a go. They have a try. You know, Telegraph yesterday was giving advice on how to sort of dodge immigration rules. If you want to spend more time in France than you should, that's the same Daily Telegraph. That's it, the great upholder of controlling our borders, giving its readers advice on how to sort of duck under France's immigration rules. Quite incredible. But they won't have noticed the hypocrisy because they genuinely think that being British somehow imparts some sort of innate superiority, despite the fact, well, you open your eyes, stick your head out the window. Despite all those facts. And so what scapegoats are going to be left? That dreadful call yesterday, heartbreaking call yesterday from the woman who fears that she as a disabled person might be next. Who's going to be the next scapegoat? 15 fellas on a boat in Portland. They're today's scapegoat. They're yesterday's scapegoat. Who's going to be the next scapegoat? 13 years in power. And the Home Secretary this morning is tweeting about a sort of mini riot on Oxford Street as if they haven't been in power for 13 years. Also tweeting about a live investigation, not the kind of behaviour you'd expect from either a lawyer or a Home Secretary in the good old days, i.e. 2014. But here we are now looking for more scapegoats. More scapegoats. Who's to blame for an NHS waiting list hitting 7.6 million? Is that the small boats? Are they to blame? Do they get off a dinghy and then go straight to the local hospital to... What did the bloke on Question Time say? Unchallenged, of course, in the marvellous post-Brexit BBC, that he's watched them personally get off the small boats and go straight to the job centre. He's personally watched them do it, where they sign on for the benefits that they trouser while simultaneously stealing all our jobs. You've got to love a scapegoat, lads. Come on. Everybody loves a scapegoat. Sounds like a rubbish Chaz and Dave song, doesn't it? Everybody loves a scapegoat. I don't know who the next scapegoat will be. And I don't know who you scapegoat for the fact that the waiting lists have gone up even further. And I don't know what the numbers mean. I don't know what the numbers mean. The numbers are now so ridiculously high. My mum got a new hip. She doesn't mind me telling you, I've checked. My mum got a new hip about 10 years ago. And it was it was more than 10 years ago, actually. I think it was about 15 years ago. I'll get a text off her in a minute. And it was such a smooth operation. Little tribute to Sade there for older listeners. It was such a smooth operation, the whole shebang from beginning to end. I mean, she was in pretty dire straits by the time she got into hospital. But it was done relatively quickly from the moment when she acknowledged that she needed it. Because, surgery is not something you should rush into headlong. But it was a pretty straightforward business from the moment that she agreed that she needed the surgery. And I don't think she'd get one now. I mean, she's well into her 80s. The idea of joining another waiting list now, and she could do with a new knee, to be honest with you, but I think that generation soldier on, don't they? And I don't know what that means in the context of 7.6 million people. Are some of these people waiting to have their tonsils removed? Is that still a thing? Do people still have tonsillectomies and then a lovely bowl of ice cream immediately afterwards? I was so hungry at boarding school that I once considered faking tonsillitis just to get the ice cream that I'd heard they gave you in hospital after you'd had your tonsils removed. I lived in a state of constant hunger at boarding school. I think they thought it was character forming. And you always tried to sit next to the bloke at breakfast who would eat all the rancid boiled eggs that passed for our breakfast. But I never did. I didn't fake tonsillitis in order to get the ice cream, but I considered it. So what does it mean? 7.6 million. And listen to this. 383,083 cases where the patient has been waiting more than 52 weeks. 97,275 cases where they have been waiting more than 65 weeks. 7,177 cases where they have been waiting more than 78 weeks. And in 314 cases, patients have been waiting for more than 2 calendar years. No one ever talks about a calendar year, do they? Is it a calendar month? Anyway, 2 years, 104 weeks in old money. And of course, because they are so fundamentally disingenuous and dishonest now, because post-Boris Johnson, post-Brexit, post-Farage, whatever you want to blame, and my new book, How They Broke Britain, blames all of those things. Whatever you want to blame, whoever you want to blame, the lie is now the point. The lie is now the policy. Lying about 4-star hotels, as we have established this week. Lying about the European Convention on Human Rights, which is what they're reduced to today. Lying about the reasons for the NHS being in such dire straits. Rishi Sunak tries to blame it on the striking doctors. I think he got bearded, didn't he? Actually, can you talk about someone being bearded if they have the appearance of a fellow who wouldn't be able to grow a beard? I'm not sure. But anyway, he got bearded by a junior doctor on Nick's programme, and he came in to take some calls last week or the week before, and trying to blame. So one of the main reasons that doctors give you for striking is the recruitment and retention crisis. Do you remember when we started taking calls, and it was quite surprising because we were expecting the financial considerations to be pretty much exclusively the reasons for striking. And fair enough, because in real terms, they have had their income decimated by 13 years of Tory rule. So absolutely decimated. And the poorer the terms and conditions, or the more the terms and conditions deteriorate, the more a workforce both loses morale and looks around for something else to do. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but an awful lot of... Would you believe, I'm all tempted to give Renata a Ray Liotta here. We've never given a Ray Liotta to a texter. Renata's daughter-in-law waited 2.5 years to have her tonsils taken out. Apparently, I've got no way of checking the veracity of this text or indeed whether or not she got ice cream afterwards. But there you go. So tonsillitis is part of the 7.6 million, quite possibly. I've got to stop getting distracted by my own inbox, haven't I? It's a terrible habit now, as I'm reaching a stage in life when I can't always remember what I was talking about before I got distracted by my own inbox. But the idea that recruitment and retention is absolutely emblematic of a doctor's vocation. And they tell us again and again and again, yes, we need more pay. We are striking for more pay. But not just so that we get an income that's more commensurate with our training and status. It's so that we attract more people to the profession and stop the people who are leaving from leaving. This is like, night follows day logic, which apparently eludes Rishi Sunak and his mates. You give doctors a better pay deal and they stop leaving the bloody country on the scale that they are currently leaving it. Or they stop mixing and matching with private sector work, which can be much better paid. I don't have the numbers of how many now do a little bit of both, but anecdotally, from what you tell me, when you reach the position where you can make that choice, you'd be almost stupid not to. Whether it's deliberate political policy or just a consequence of slow decline, I don't know. I lean towards a bit of both, generally, on those sort of questions. But those two R's, the two R's, recruitment and retention. Absolutely intrinsic to industrial action being taken by doctors and nurses. Intrinsic. We need to make the job more attractive, to get people in and to stop people leaving. Especially all those quasi-racists and crypto-fascists who pretended that they wanted to look after us. We've got to train our own. I hated that. I didn't hate that rhetoric enough at the time. I was too distracted by other elements, the more obviously racist behaviour and things like Farage's Nazi poster. That line there, we've got to train our own. You're a doctor. You're looking after my kid in a British hospital and you happen to have been born in France or Nigeria. You're turning on the radio and someone's saying we've got to train our own. They're essentially saying you should F off back to France, aren't they? To doctors and to nurses. And you see, once they've said it to doctors and nurses, they can say it to refugees with their eyes shut. We've got to train our own. Oh, how's that working out for you, lads? How's that working out for you with 7.6 million people now waiting to get an operation on the NHS? 7.6 million people waiting to start routine hospital treatment. What happened to training our own? You've had 7 years to do it now since you got your stupid referendum over the line. Where are they all? I'll tell you where they are. They're leaving at a rate of knots. They're all going to Australia. They're getting better paid in other countries. If you hadn't abolished their freedom of movement, they'd probably be working in a bunch of European hospitals as well. And of course, they can work in European hospitals because they also lied to you about what controls of population, what controls a government could bring in on foreign workers or European workers. So what does it mean? What does 7.6 million mean? What does it mean to you? Can we try, in our own clumsy, humble way this morning, to just put some faces on these figures? I think of my mum. Having to shuffle backwards up the stairs, right? Because her hip had given out on her and she couldn't do it. So she'd shuffle backwards on her backside up the stairs. And that is what 7.6 million people on a waiting list looks like. That is someone who can't leave their house because they're in too much pain. It will be trivial stuff or relatively trivial stuff as well. But my goodness me, you need to put some faces on these figures. And don't hold back from telling me what you think about Rishi, if you are a doctor, what you think about Rishi Sunak's attempts to blame you. After 13 years of Tory rule, in 2010, patient satisfaction with the NHS was the highest in history. That, remember, smack in the middle of a global financial crisis that they, the liars, tried to blame on Gordon Brown. All of this stuff is linked. If you get out of bed on the right side in the morning, it's all linked. Highest patient satisfaction in the history of the NHS in 2010. Fast forward 13 years of Tory rule, 7.6 million people waiting for routine hospital treatment. Faces on the figures, please. What does that mean? And for doctors and for nurses, we probably didn't give you enough space to tell us what you thought about Rishi Sunak trying to blame these figures on you. It's another one of his key pledges, of course, to cut waiting lists before the next election. And he did last month claim that strikes had made it more challenging to bring down waiting list numbers, which, is so stupid. You send doctors back to work happy. You create a health service into which more and more people want to move and work. And waiting lists start shrinking immediately. But he's not interested in patients. He's not interested in you. He's only interested in headlines and posturing and ludicrous, empty rhetoric. And when he's not scapegoating refugees, he's scapegoating doctors. And if they'll scapegoat doctors, they'll scapegoat anybody. Oh, it's all their fault. The people who've dedicated their lives, trained for years to work within the NHS, it's all their fault it's going so badly. Nothing to do with us. We've just been in charge for 13 years and decimated their income. Literally, actually, for fans of Latin. So there is a rule in radio. I think it was invented by the legend that is Clive Bull. There is a rule in radio that you can always make the phones ring by asking the question, is there anybody old out there feeling poorly? But it is not, unfortunately, likely to prompt a cavalcade of scintillating contributions. So I'm conscious of avoiding that. scenario while recognising the seriousness of 7.6 million. 7.6 million. Patients and crucially doctors and nurses, GPs, everybody affected directly, immediately and personally by this, whether it's because of your job or because of your medical condition. Let's just put some faces on these figures this morning in the hope that somebody somewhere might tell Rishi Sunak about what's actually happening in the NHS while he tries to use it as a political football while scapegoating doctors and consigning patients to ever longer waits for routine hospital treatment. And never forget that in 2010, patient satisfaction was the highest in history. And the numbers of people dying as a consequence of A&E delays. I mean, some of the stuff I've unearthed while researching my new book, it's all out there in plain sight. There's no revelations in there or scoops. But if we had a media that reported stuff properly, instead of what people are getting for breakfast on that boat in Portland, they actually reported regularly and with the same sense of outrage on how many hundreds or thousands of people are dying as a consequence of understaffed A&Es, dying unnecessarily, we'd probably be on the streets rioting. And then Suella Braverman could tweet about how we should all be hunted down. It is 19 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. 7.6 million people now on the NHS waiting list. What does that mean in your world? 22 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Breaking news this morning that the number of people on the NHS waiting list has risen to 7.6 million. I missed a little bit of information. You picked it up in the news bulletin. But here it is, 13 years in power, right? It's the highest ever. 13 years ago, patient satisfaction with the NHS was the highest ever. So we've got two record-breaking statistics there. Last Labour government took the NHS to a place where NHS patient satisfaction was the highest it had ever been. Conservative government 13 years later, and I'm going to say just 13 years later, takes the waiting list to the highest it has ever been. Gareth is in Ormskirk. Gareth, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James, good to speak to you. So I've just literally had an operation yesterday on my knee, which was very successful. It was a torn meniscus and went very well. But it happened in January. And actually, when you get onto the treatment pathway, I found that it was fairly robust, fairly quick, to be honest. But the process leading up to that was pretty shocking. I went to a walk-in centre at my local hospital. They told me it was a sprain, take an ibuprofen, and that was it. Then went to my GP, similar situation, saw the physio there, and they said it was arthritis. And I knew something was wrong, so I was persistent enough to sort of eventually get a scan when they then said, yeah, you've got a problem, and on you go.
What happens otherwise? You just wear a tubey grip for the rest of your life or something like that?
And take ibuprofen, exactly. So that, I think, is designed to put lots of barriers and steps in the way. And it's only when you start becoming insistent that they maybe start to sit up and take notice. And when you get through all of that, it wasn't so bad. But now I've had cause to complain because, in particular, the physio that I saw was very dismissive of me. And if they're operating in that way for other people, then it's not going to be great, and you think other people might suffer the same problem. But here's a stat for you, James.
Go on.
The amount of compensation that was paid out in year 2021 by the NHS for malpractice, how much do you think that was?
I have absolutely no idea.
£14 billion.
Are you sure?
Google it and have a look. It's unbelievable the amount of money that's being paid out for this. Now, if it was more efficient and effective, then that money could be put back into the system. And my complaints, actually, when I've started digging into it, it's all fragmented. So the walk-in centre that I went to at the hospital...
NHS compensation payouts in 2021-2022 amounted to £2.6 billion. This is an increase on the previous year's figure of 2.4. And about a quarter of that goes on legal fees.
Well, there you are. So
what do you mean there you are? You just come on national radio and dropped a massive porky.
Well, I've seen some other figures, James, so I'd probably...
I don't care.
I'd be doing some other research about that rather than a quick Google search. So, but that said, James, even if I'm wrong, £3 billion is quite a lot of money, isn't it? That's no small change.
But it's considerably less than nearly 30 billion quid, isn't it? Which is, on another programme, people would have taken that away and thought that it was true.
Well, I said 14, not 30.
Sorry, I thought you said 24.
No. I think that's important.
All right. Well, I don't think that's
old.
Well, we're all getting old, but I don't. I mean, and it's an unfortunate, I don't know, red herring or cul-de-sac. But I don't know. I mean, presumably everybody makes mistakes, and compensation needs to be paid. But it's a drop in the ocean of the overall budget, I suppose, or not. 350 million quid a week was enough to persuade the country to become the first in history to impose economic sanctions on itself, and that wasn't true either. Melvin's in Ladbroke Grove. Melvin, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hello,
same as the last caller, actually. I had a knee surgery last year for a torn meniscus, but I want to compare it to an operation I had back in 2011.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, same hospital as well, so I think it's a really good test, but I tore the ligament in my knee, and they told me I had to wait 6 months for an operation. Now, bearing in mind that the tear meant that I couldn't actually walk properly. So I couldn't go to work. I was hopping around. I couldn't walk. Had to wait 6 months.
How do you tear a meniscus? Is it exercise?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, see, there it is again. Got to be careful, mate. Seriously, you never meet anyone with that kind of injury who hasn't done it while exercising.
Absolutely. And in 2011, same hospital, I broke my thumb. How'd
you do that?
Sport again.
You see. Well, I'm saying nothing. You carry on.
But 2011, broke my thumb, went in on a Monday on the advice of my work colleague.
Yeah.
And then they called me back and said, come in on Wednesday. And then they fixed my Bennett's fracture on the Wednesday. So basically 2 days later after breaking my thumb in 2011, got seen 2 days later, couldn't walk.
And we're not comparing apples with apples, obviously. So it may be for some reason that thumbs are easier to deal with than knees, I'm sure. But there is a point here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just think the second surgery was way more urgent. So you would think it would be more of a priority, but actually it took infinitely longer.
Yeah, and as you point out, and as Marcus Chown, the rather brilliant science writer, has just picked up on Twitter as well, these are people, not necessarily all 7.6 million, but many of them will be people who cannot work as a consequence of being on this waiting list for so long, and people who are not being cured and will instead get iller and possibly die as a consequence of being on the waiting list for so long. So the hit on the economy is actually enormous. The days you missed from work, times them by not necessarily 7.6 million, but a significant figure. And the hit to the economy is absolutely huge, prompting Marcus to conclude that there is no way the economy can be rescued without restoring the NHS to 2010 levels.
Agreed.
Aye. Unless, of course, you're more concerned about the payouts and dividends of shareholders in private health companies than you are with the overall population and the national picture, as opposed to individual bank balances. If that's naive or simplistic, then pick me up and tell me so. Seriously, I make these statements sometimes in a rather sweeping fashion, and they're sincere, they're well meant, and they're relatively well researched. But none of us are infallible. 0345 6060 is the number that you need. I don't know if you've picked up on it this week. Talking about 30p Leenock, very reluctantly most days. I don't know if you've picked up on it. I have a sense at the moment of the gears not biting. You know when two cogs are turning independently, and that one is supposed to bite the other. Or one cog is turning, and it's supposed to turn the next cog. The teeth, is that the right word? The teeth of the cogs intersect, interjoin, and then the other cog starts turning. I have a sense of politics of the Tories' cog not actually biting any other cogs at the moment. I don't think people are sitting in the pub talking about wanting to leave the European Convention on Human Rights because the UK is not enough like Russia at the moment. I just don't get it in the way that people were sitting in the pub talking about wanting to leave the European Union. And on this, the waiting list stuff, it just feels really, although he's making pledges about it, the numbers are continuing to go up. And I'm not persuaded that people think he gives them a hoot about it. I'm really not. The teeth aren't biting. That's just me. 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. It is 10:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question is, what does that mean? What does that number mean behind that number? of 7.6 million people, the highest ever number on the NHS waiting list. It's almost as if he's got, what's the opposite of the Midas touch? Every time Rishi Sunak promises to improve something, it starts getting measurably worse, doesn't it? I think that inflation will come down. I don't know if it's going to come down as much as he promised that it would, but that's as much to do with economic gravity as it is to do with anything else. And it's actually nothing to do with economic policy. It's Bank of England policy that would have an effect on stuff like that. But it's not gone well. And I think, and I say this as a thicko, this is not me being condescending. I always, when I'm condescending, it's deliberate. I'm never condescending by accident. If inflation comes down, prices are still going up. I needed to explain this to myself, because you sort of, oh great, it's come down, but it's still, say, it's still 6% or 10% or 8%. It still means everything's going up. So inflation is 12%, and then you go, that's awful. It's come down to 8%. That's great. It's not. It's everything's still going up by 8p in the pound. You can tell I went to the London School of Economics, can't you? 10:35 is the time. Pippa is in Clapham. Pippa, what can you tell us?
Hello, hi James.
Hello.
I wanted to call in because I've had 4 operations privately.
Okay.
And that's because I simply cannot wait for the NHS. My most recent operation was that I had a displaced meniscus tear, so a bit broke off and was floating around my knee, and I had a cyst by my ACL.
What is it with why every call today has been about meniscuses?
They're very easy to tear.
Oh, well, clearly.
And
how did you tear yours? Were you exercising?
I was actually.
You see. Carry on.
So I think that we're moving towards a 2-tier healthcare system, whereby people that have corporate healthcare through work can go privately to have non-emergency operations, and everyone else, can just fend for themselves.
Can you contrast what your weight would have been? Do you know?
Yeah, I know. I can exactly. I can because I asked, because I was leaving that job.
Yes.
And I wanted to get the operation done beforehand, so I was worried that I wouldn't be able to. So I asked for an NHS referral.
Right.
And my operation was done, and I had to wait for the surgeon because he was away. That was done sort of start to finish. Went to see him. My consultation, the operation was done within 4 weeks. Yeah. Whereas the NHS, to just have an initial consultation, because we actually knew that it was a displaced tear, was a 6-month wait list just to go and see them.
Before you get seen, 6 months to see someone?
Yes, exactly.
As opposed to 4 weeks to get done and dusted and sent on your way?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. But I say this, I feel like when I say the 2-tier healthcare system, I had an emergency and I went in and they saw me very, very quickly. But, I think the NHS is getting to the point, and I don't even think the Labour government will be able to fix it, whereby they can deal with an emergency, but anything else, you'll just have to fend for yourself or wait on this wait list. Because they can say they're going to throw so much money at it, but, knowing doctors myself, they're tired, they don't have enough time to spend with their patients, and we're just sort of papering over the cracks. Yes.
Well, that's the big challenge. That's the big question. Wes Streeting has assured me many Labour supporters are uncomfortable with how comfortable he is with private sector cooperation. But Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer have both assured me that the plan is actually to hit reverse, start heading back to 2010 levels. Marcus Chown making the point that there's an economic case for it. So, we have to stop seeing the NHS as a drain on resources and see it instead as a catalyst for wealth, because the more people are healthy, the more people are earning, and the more people are earning, the more people are paying tax. If you'd had 6 months, I don't know what you do for a living. I doubt that you sort of have
actuary.
You're what?
An actuary.
Well, an actuary. I thought you said an actress then. So you can work at the desk. You can work at a desk. But some people, if their knee's gone kaput, like Melvin in Ladbroke Grove, he can't go to work. And that is, there's an economic case for it. Well, who knows? And the recruitment and retention angle as well is because everyone's talking to me about meniscuses today, Pippa. We haven't even touched on it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I have friends that are doctors, and they're just they're tired, they're exoxed, and they actually want to help.
I know. I keep hearing it. I hear. I'm older than you, so my friends are consultants, but they've all reached points now where they never thought they'd reach. It's quite incredible. What is the plural of meniscus? Would it be meniscus or menisci? Would it be meniscus, menisci? Would it be 2 eyes on the end of menisc? Menisci? Meniscus. I don't know. Patsy's in Norwich. Hello, Patsy.
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine, and I'm going from a meniscus to a uterus.
And I wasn't.
Story.
Crikey, that's an interesting journey. I wasn't going to accept your call if it was another meniscus. I was going to politely bin you off, as the saying goes. Come on, tell me. Well, I can't say the words. Tell me about your uterus live on the radio. That would just be weird.
It's actually not mine. It's my daughter's, but she's given me permission.
That's even weirder. Carry on. Of course, she has. Carry on.
She's one of those 7.5 million people, and I want you to picture a tall, beautiful, talented woman.
Okay.
Who, for 5 days every month, is in excruciating pain.
Oh, yes.
Now, for 2 years, she's been going backs and forwards to the doctors, and they just hand out pills.
Yeah.
But because it's been going on for so long, it means she's anemic as well as in pain. So we paid for a private scan. She took it to the GP, and on the basis of that, was referred to an NHS consultant. And her appointment is in July 2024. Incredible.
2024.
2024. They sent her a letter, and the letter said, if you don't get an appointment by July 2023, please give us a ring.
Hey?
So we thought that she might have an appointment maybe September or October 2023.
Right.
And they went, no, it's July 2024. I couldn't believe it.
Dear.
Even more interestingly, they won't accept the private health scan. So she has to have another scan before she sees the consultant, which is going to mean it takes
prolong it even more. I kind of understand that. It'll be, like accreditation or using the same technology or just red tape and bureaucracy. But
that's
I mean,
what it is. Yeah.
From where you're sitting, and more importantly, from where she's sitting, it does seem very silly, doesn't it? Very recondite.
Absolutely.
What options does she have? Go on.
I mean, the only option she has is to go private, but it is expensive.
How much is it? Do you know?
It would cost about £1,000 just for the sort of initial consultation and the test to confirm what she has.
Yes.
And I mean, we can do that, but I am very reluctant because I believe in the NHS.
It's a tricky position, that, isn't it? And actually, it's a tricky position that's best described sometimes by people in the NHS, and they know that there's a sense that every time you decide to go down the private route, you're popping another tack in the coffin of the NHS. I don't know if that's true, but it doesn't.
I mean, it's so difficult because I went to see my GP because I've got fibromyalgia, and she said to me, I can refer you to a rheumatologist. Would you like me to do that privately? Now, I have never heard that.
The GP said that?
GP said that to me, and I was totally shocked by that.
Could be on commission.
I know. Oh, God
I'm joking, actually, but someone will probably text me and tell me that can actually happen. But, I mean, you can't blame the GP for that necessarily, because if you could go private, you're coming off the NHS waiting list, and B, you're getting treated quicker. And
you're allowing somebody who can't afford. But isn't that the issue then? It does then become a two-tier system.
Well, that's what Pippa said, isn't it, immediately prior to you. And I think between the two of you, you've highlighted exactly what that means. And the idea that it's accidental seems to me to be, at the very least, unlikely, doesn't it?
And I can't tell you how angry I am with the Tories.
No.
I'm 100% with you. Hated Brexit. Yes. I just wish they'd go away.
Well, yeah, I know. I suppose now I should mention that I'm in Norwich on November the 8th. Patsy,
I know. I've got tickets.
Oh, have you? Oh, well, I shall see. Yeah. I shall see you at the Epic Studios. I look forward to it.
I will get the book, and you can sign it for me.
It'll be an absolute pleasure. Thank you. You can tell I've very nearly got to the end of it now, so I can start plugging it mercilessly, confident that it will actually be out on November the 2nd. Whereas before I went on holiday, I was flirting with the possibility of having to postpone publication or even pay back my advance. And nobody would have wanted that. Patsy, thank you. 10:43. And unless anybody has got gammon in their ears today, I am supremely conscious of how lucky I am to be in the position that I'm in financially, and yet very, very much committed to having conversations about people who are in less fortunate positions, which is going to be the massive majority of people on that 7.6 million waiting list. We don't need any medical treatment at the moment in our family, but we would, if we did, be like Patsy, capable of paying for it up to a point. I mean, I couldn't afford a transplant. Capable of paying for it, but very reluctant to do so because it adds to the sense of the NHS being, if you like, unfolding or heading towards a two-tier health system. It is 10:43. Tava is in Kingston. Tava, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Thank you for having me on. I just wanted to tell you the story, actually. I've had a hysterectomy at the end of April.
Right.
And it took me, I think, about a year in the end to actually get my hysterectomy. But when I first went in, I had a growth in my womb the size of a grapefruit. And by September, October time, it was 22 centimetres. I used to call it my beach ball.
Well, it's a watermelon. Yeah. I mean, I'm staying with the fruit measure, the metric of fruit here, Tava, after your grapefruit invitation.
I mean, I don't want to tell you all the winding road of the misdiagnosis, the delays, and all the things that happened. But ultimately, the story I wanted to tell you was when I went in, I was in for a 6-hour operation, and they tried to get rid of me at 10 a.m. the next morning,
right?
And I still couldn't stand up or still hadn't been to the bathroom or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the worst thing about it was I was in a ward with, I think, 6 women who'd all had operations, and I was the youngest by some.
Right.
And there was an old lady on my ward who was 80-something, really stoic, northern, lovely. And she was in so much pain all night, and the nursing staff just didn't have enough people on to help her, to deal with her. Other people on the ward were crying in pain. I was one of them. And then at 7 o'clock the next morning, the surgical team came into the ward and gave her terminal cancer diagnosis in front of the ward.
Yeah.
And she didn't have her husband with her. She didn't have her kids with her. And, I just sat there watching this. It was like a pantomime the whole night.
Yeah.
And I didn't blame any of the staff themselves because I could see they were all working their socks off.
I'm glad, but it would be easy to do so, and it would be easy to understand people doing so, wouldn't it?
It was, but everybody in the room was trying so hard to treat the staff respectfully.
Yeah.
Everyone could see what was happening. There was one nurse on for all of us. We all had huge catheter bags. We all had multiple different types of pain relief requirements. We'd all had different operations. And there was one probably young 30s nurse trying to deal with all of that with one ancillary nurse. And the two of them would just run off their feet all night. And you just knew that they were like 20 seconds away from a disaster at any minute.
Yeah, and they must know. Imagine the stress of working. Wrong. Imagine the stress of working there as well, knowing that.
And constantly, nothing changed. It was that level. It was like, you can see when people are working at 140%,
Yeah, of course you can.
And it was like that.
And do you know what you've done? You've just done something, from the perspective of a patient, you've just done something that doctors and nurses haven't managed to do for me, which is when they say, I didn't take a break for my whole shift, or I stayed on for 2 hours longer. And I sort of think, well, why? Go on, take a break, go home when it's time to, but you've just absolutely, you've just communicated that so perfectly, Tava. Because you can't, it would be a bit like, a car heading towards a cliff edge and you decide to take 5 minutes not trying to turn the steering wheel. Wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I joked with people at the time and said it was like having an operation on EasyJet. I mean, I could use Ryanair if we like.
Yeah, but they're efficient. I mean, I don't want to get sued, but I don't want to get sued by Michael O'Leary or Stelios or whoever owns those outfits these days. But they are no frills. I don't mind a no frills at HS actually, as long as the destination, delivery.
You say that, James, but I had big decisions to make about: am I going to keep my ovaries, aren't I? Am I going to get rid of my cervix, or aren't I? No one could answer that question.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I wrote to the surgeon, who, by the way, was incredible and brilliant. I was in surgery for 6 hours. He had to shave my bladder away from the lining of my stomach and get rid of a beach ball, which was potentially cancerous. And I couldn't talk to him.
And that is like Marcus's point about things, as you mentioned, cancer, but things potentially getting worse with every passing week or month of waiting.
I don't want to downplay the runner's menisci, but,
Is it definitely menisci for the plural?
I don't know, but I thought I'd go for it.
Yeah, well played. Your confidence was really impressive there. It seems like Jacob Rees-Mogg doing Latin. No idea whether it's accurate or not, but supremely confident. Go on.
but I was bleeding out for 3 days a month, 4 days a month at work for 2 years to wait for this operation. And, it affected my ability to do my job. It affected my ability to be a decent parent and wife. Yeah, so there's I know we don't talk about economic as well. On the radio.
Yeah, we do.
But,
of course we can.
But, there's a lot of stuff we don't talk about that's hidden, and there basically is not an effective menopausal service on the NHS. Again, you have to pay for it.
Speaking of paying for it, Claire has tweeted while you were talking, just to say I had a hysterectomy for exactly the same reason as Tava. A similar size growth, lengthy surgery. I was in for 6 nights. My care was excellent. I went private. And there it is. Hey, Tava, thank you. I'm very late for this, actually, but actually I'll tell you afterwards. It is 10:52, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Two things, which I presume you were clear on, but it's always healthy to be even clearer. Actually, one I think it would have been clear. This is only England, This is NHS England, where there's 7.6 million people waiting to start treatment at the end of June. But another thing you won't probably have clocked, I certainly hadn't, John in Northumberland points out, that to get to the point where you are off a waiting list, you just have to have entered a treatment pathway. So, when it says they are waiting to start routine hospital treatment reported last month, this is what our callers have been saying. It was 6 months before I could be seen. And then another wait, a shorter wait actually, before you'd get the operation. I think all of the menisci 3 have all described getting treated quite quickly after they'd had that initial consultation, but the wait for the initial consultation is growing exponentially. John points out you come off the treatment pathway at the moment when you hand a bottle of wee to a nurse practitioner in a hospital clinic, is his rather lyrical description of that process. You could still be a considerable distance from treatment, years in fact, and this is from a chap with 30 years in the NHS. He adds, this would mean that the real figures are considerably worse than what we are being told. This is not an opinion, it's counting. And he adds, who said that? No idea. 10:54 is the time. Brandon is in Ipswich. Brandon, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah.
Hello,
basically, I've been seeing cardiology department at my hospital since I was 16. I'm 30 now, so about half of my life.
Yeah.
So I've sort of seen what it was like when...
Yeah, that's helpful. Go on, talk us through it. Yes.
So basically, I was still sort of under the... I forget what's called youth part. Yeah. It was quick. It was quick. I went in for emergency. My pulse was at high end of 200 beats a minute.
Right.
And since then, after that, I've been on beta blockers for my whole life. And then so this was sort of early 2000s. Actually, I think it was about basically around 2010. What you said is the best year.
Yeah.
And then, so it's been in managed going throughout my life. Told I would grow out of it. However, I reached time I was 25. But noticed that there was an arrhythmia, more issues, and you go down to October of last year, of this year just gone, and basically went in to see the cardiologist. He noticed things that he wanted to see again and said, I'd like to see you in 6 months to do a 2-week scan.
Yes.
So that would have been April this year. I phoned up in July, hadn't heard anything, and they said, no, don't worry, you haven't been missed. You are on the list. However, the consultant only got 3 clinics from July till the end of August. We will try to see you as soon as possible, but it could be up to a year.
Wow.
And when it's something that they've found...
you're going to get scared, aren't you? Or concerned.
Yeah, and I can't go private because no insurance company or whatever will touch me because of my multitude of disabilities and health issues.
I hear you. So what is the best case scenario now? When are you likely to see someone?
I'd probably be looking at about July next year.
And how are you feeling in the meantime?
It's horrible. It's completely anxiety inducing, and it's just the fact that I'm trying to study a uni course,
right.
And the amount of times I've ended up having to go to hospital or missing because of issues with my health, and it's been going on for about half my life now, and it's sort of a bit like, okay, so this is how I'm going, who I am now, is it?
Oh, mate, I'm sorry to hear this. I really am, and I think you've conveyed really powerfully the quiet despair of not being seen. You know, the sense of there's no light at the end of the tunnel, or if there is, it seems to be moving further away, and that must be so draining. And with a condition like yours, if it's linked to hearts, of course, have a very close relationship with stress and things like that, it's going to be making things worse. 7.6 million, the highest ever number, and was it Boris Johnson who said, "Don't look at waiting times and don't look at cancer diagnoses, look at wage growth"? I think it was. But hey-ho. Brandon, take care. Jim's in. And the other thing that's been brought home to me today is the economic argument. Because you think of someone who is not, because they are not healthy, they are not working, or they're not working as much as they should be. So when Brandon isn't going to university because of his health, imagine that was a job and he wouldn't be able to do that. So that's the message that needs to be, I think, driven home. Admittedly, when you get into elderly care and care for the retired, the demographic, the diagnosis is different. The logic is different. But for the significant number of people on that list, the sooner they get treatment, the sooner they get back into the swing of things, I think. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. I'll squeeze in Jim in Bude, but I don't have long, Jim. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it brief.
Thank you.
I had to wait 2 years for a hernia operation. I'm a commercial artist.
Right.
And as a result...
Oh, phone line's gone. We had a couple of that today. I don't know. It's nothing to do with Jim. It's certainly nothing to do with my colleagues. It's just bad luck occasionally. I think, if you're working as a commercial artist, presumably you've got to be up a ladder and stuff like that, or working in public spaces. And so having a hernia is going to take a huge chunk out of your livelihood and your ability to do your job. So more evidence of Marcus Chown's point, which hadn't really occurred to me before, largely because I'm a bear of very little brain, that the economic costs of this, never mind the personal, emotional and physical toll that these waiting lists take. But anyway, don't worry, whatever you do, because Rishi Sunak's having a lovely time in Disneyland, and 30p Lee is swearing in the national media and being congratulated for it effectively by plenty of his posher colleagues who think that's what the working class looks like. Some inarticulate, foul-mouthed oaf shooting off in the corner of a room. That's how disconnected they are. And there's 15 people on a barge in Portland, and that's really brilliant in a country where sort of regular immigration last year was 606,000. So it's brilliant to see 15 people on a barge in Portland if you care about such matters. And the NHS continues to hemorrhage staff and fail to attract new doctors and nurses, while Rishi Sunak blames the ones that are still there for the size of the waiting list that has just become the highest ever. That was quite neatly done, actually. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. That's very sad news about Wilko. Up to 12,000 jobs in jeopardy now as Wilko goes into administration. You can tell someone's age. With a tree, if you chop a tree down and supposedly you count the rings to tell how old the tree is, you can tell someone's age by the high street shops they can remember. The closing forever. The ones that seemed like part of the fabric of the high street. Woolworths was an absolute monolith in this measure of age. We'll have a Wilko generation now. There'll be people who where were you when you found out that Wilko was shutting down? It's never really done it for me, Wilko. I don't know why. It's geography, isn't it, really? It depends where you are. If there's one near you or a regular one. Robert Dias, I could talk about for hours. TK Maxx, I could talk about for hours. I got sent a little present by TK Maxx last time we talked about them. That was very kind of them, wasn't it? It was very nice. I'll put it towards your Christmas present. And yet Wilko, Woolies is the gold standard, I think, of blimey. Do you remember when Woolworths closed? But Wilko, I just think of the 12,000 jobs that are now at risk. They'll be looking for someone to come in and buy some of it, keep some shops open. That's what usually happens, isn't it? That's what usually occurs, but I can't think of a way. A couple of you asking me to talk about it. I can't really think of an interesting way of talking about it. I also got someone asking me to talk about the threat to take us out of the European Convention of Human Rights. You can rewind live radio now. Did you know that on the Global Player? So you can go and hear me talking about Suella Braverman's opinion that we're not enough like Vladimir Putin's Russia at the moment, so we should join him and Belarus in being the only European countries not signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights. Also, although she's probably too daft to understand this, I think it jeopardises the Good Friday Agreement. So rewind live radio to about an hour ago if you want to hear me talking about that. In Idiot's Corner, someone's saying, I wonder why you're not talking about Diane Abbott's tweet. Well, I am. I literally just did. I had to look up what it was, but Diane Abbott responded in a reflection of 30p Lennox foul language about this tragedy off the coast of Italy, where asylum seekers have drowned in numbers trying to make their way here from Tunisia. So if you are picking up on Diane Abbott's choice of language in the context of a human tragedy like that, then it's straight into Idiot's Corner for you. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Okay, we're going to do something a little bit different next. It's Mystery Hour at 12. Don't forget, I've got some exciting Mystery Hour related news. I am so busy, I realise, looking at the schedule of book tour events, but I'm also doing the Games Fair at Olympia in January. I'm going to be very second division there because I'll probably be with Stephen Mulhern. So everyone will be queuing up to have a selfie with Stephen Mulhern, and I imagine I'll be asked to sort of hold coats or even take the pictures. That'll be what I'll be standing there at a Games Fair with Stephen, and everyone will be saying, "Oh, excuse me," and they won't know who I am. They'll say, "Could you take a picture of me with Stan?" I'll be go, "Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I know he's great, isn't he? He's ever so funny. He's a lovely smile." Yeah, that's coming up in January. But Mystery Hour will be with us at 12. Before that, two stories which myself and the producer, well, it's more the producer than me actually, which Eleanor has very cleverly knitted together. One is about Britain's strictest landlord, who is calling time. Calling time after 31 years. And the other was an interesting piece in The Guardian about going to the cinema. Both of them reflect a decline in basic behaviour. Now, as I say those words out loud, I realise that I am flirting with a radio phone-in on the subject of the good old days. Oh, things were better in my day. Oh, the youth of today don't know what they're talking about. And I don't want to do that. I have no desire to do that. I always quote Thucydides, or misremember Thucydides at this point, who was writing in ancient Greece, probably somewhere around, I'd need to check actually, 500 years before Christ, 500 years BC or BCE, if you prefer. And he said something about the youth of today being rude and disrespectful and not knowing how to treat their elders. So it's not the youth that I want to talk about. That's how I can confidently reassure myself that we're not about to embark upon a sort of Victor Meldrew phone-in. It's not the youth. I don't want to talk about the youth, okay? I want to talk about people your own age, whatever age you are. And if you're making comparisons with what things used to be like, then you're going to need to be a little bit older. And this is a belief put forward by both of these people. Stuart Heritage writing in The Guardian about having an unpleasant experience at the cinema because people apparently don't know how to behave anymore. And the landlord who had a reputation as being Britain's strictest, Sean Colling, who is calling time on his tenure or tenancy at the Maltings pub in York. Oh, I know it. Gosh. I didn't know. I didn't know it had a reputation for having the strictest landlord. They both think that people's behaviour has changed post-pandemic. He writes, he tells The Guardian, I think before COVID, people were more respectful of our wishes and the atmosphere and ambience we are trying to create. Things have changed. People don't appear to have the same manners, respect, patience. A lot of people seem to have a sense of entitlement, and it is usually people from out of town. COVID has definitely changed people's temperaments. People go to restaurants and everyone is now a Michelin-starred chef sat there judging someone else's cookery. like this topic a lot, but I want you to police the Victor Meldrew problem, all right? I don't just want you to ring in and tell me about the good old days. I want this to be a post-COVID conversation about the behaviour of people in public spaces. That's what it's about. Do you recognise, especially if you work in hospitality or you work in... do cinemas count as hospitality? I don't know. Entertainment venues. Have you noticed... There's two questions, really. Have you noticed a marked decline in the behaviour of customers? 0345 6060 973. And the second question is, do we think it is down to COVID? I hadn't thought of it that way myself previously, but I have noted what both of these people say. Not so much in hospitality venues, I don't think, but certainly at theatres and cinemas. We went to see Hamilton. Did I tell you this at the time? We went to see Hamilton, and the girl sitting next to me, who was about 14, I would estimate, she was on her iPad. She was playing a game on her iPad at Hamilton. And I know that you are thinking, or possibly you were thinking, because I did immediately, that perhaps there's a reason for that there might be a special needs scenario where the iPad keeps it. But there really wasn't, because after about 10 minutes, when she got a high score, she passed it to her sister, who was in the row behind her, and she had a go on it, playing on an iPad while I was trying to watch Hamilton. And I'm not like I used to be. I'm not up for a fight all the time. You may have noticed this on the radio, but I do. Once you get distracted by something like that, and you huff and puff a bit, and you do some funny looks. But I found myself actually just, what the hell were their parents thinking? No, it's not like you're complaining about a baby crying or something like that, or you're complaining about people sort of not realising how much noise their sweet wrappers are making. Do you know what I mean? It's you're sitting in a theatre, a dark theatre, and someone sitting next to you is playing a game on a tablet device. And I think that might have been down to people not knowing how to behave in these sort of scenarios. Stuart, what's his chops, writes in The Guardian, Stuart Heritage, just as he realised watching a screening of Barbie that people hadn't been to the cinema for 3 or 4 years, and they'd just either never known or completely forgotten how to behave. It was a full auditorium, but he couldn't quite believe how many people had brought their children, not like 12A children, age appropriate, but tiny little children, young toddlers, sort of running around the place. And behaving raucously. And he posits that the lockdowns of 2020, coupled with the film studios' sudden mania for slinging all their new releases onto streaming platforms, means that people have stopped going to the cinema altogether, and nobody wants to spend several hours shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of strangers in an enclosed space, and everyone's forgotten how to behave. And then you go to the pub landlord, who says COVID has definitely changed people's temperaments. People go to restaurants and everyone's now a chef. We would, I do think, why should we change our beliefs to suit them? We would lose everything we've worked hard for. We're trying to make the majority feel comfortable. And as a consequence of that, this particular pub is losing this particular landlord. So 2 questions. Have you noticed this? 13 minutes after 11 is the time. Have you noticed a decline in the clientele wherever it is you work? Okay? Hit those numbers now. You'll get straight through. I don't know that. I mean, it's one of those conversations, this, isn't it? Is it worth ringing in to tell me everything's exactly tickety-boo, James? It's exactly as it was before. I want to examine. Let's start from the perspective that things have got worse. The behaviour of clientele and customers in hospitality and entertainment spaces has deteriorated measurably. Give me your evidence of that on 0345 6060 973. And then I want you to tell me honestly whether or not you think it's COVID, whether or not you think it's lockdowns, because that involves a little bit of self-examination, doesn't it? You have to think to yourself, do you know what? Maybe I've started behaving a little bit differently since lockdown. Maybe but just your relationship with the world around you is slightly different. We normally talk about this in the context of the workplace. I was going to do that today, actually. I was going to talk about can you believe the difference in your work, approach to work and where you work compared to 2019? I'm going to take it from that angle rather than just shilling for commercial landlords and people who hate working from home because it's affecting their own bottom line. I was going to look at it from the other angle, but let's not. Let's do this instead. The behavioural angle, not your behaviour with regards to where you work, but the behaviour of people around you. I like that, the two C's, clientele and customers. We've had some fun phone-ins over the years about appalling customers. There's still a little bit of me that is in retail. Although it was decades ago, I still sort of have very live and warm memories of those experiences and customers. But have you detected a decline in general conduct? And talk to me why it might be COVID, okay? 0345 6060 973. Why would COVID have done this, all right? 16 minutes after 11. Hit those numbers now. You will get through. No, this is interesting. So there's dispute not over whether or not behaviour in public has declined, but over what the source might be. You'll be unsurprised to learn that I have some sympathy for Stephen in Finchley, who writes, behaviour has changed since Brexit, James. Brexit empowered the arrogant, bigoted folk of this country. Perhaps COVID lockdowns amplified it, but Brexit was the beginning. And speaking of Brexit, here is someone who almost certainly voted for it. People are not allowed to confront bad behaviour anymore, as you are deemed racist, homophobe, misogynist, neuro-fascist or something else, as now everybody is part of a minority. Well done, everyone. Well, you're part of a minority. You're in Idiot's Corner. I should complete my own anecdote. When I reached the point of impatience, I leant to the mother of the child with the tablet, and I said, "Could you possibly turn the tablet off? It's distracting everybody from what's going on stage." And she looked shocked, but she did it. I think if I'd done it in an angry fashion, it may not have worked. You've always got that tension, haven't you, between using anger to, if you like, bully people into doing what you want, or not being robust enough but because it was a woman, I never would have deployed any sort of higher level of emotion. And that worked. But after about 40 minutes, the kid sneaked it out and started doing it again. And when I started huffing and puffing, you could tell the mum was getting annoyed with me, not getting annoyed with her child for using the tablet. And you know, people talking. You pay so much. You've got to sell a kidney to go to the theatre these days. People are messing around and talking. It can be very frustrating. But people are not disputing whether or not the decline has taken place. They are disputing the causes of it, the reasons for it. Steve writes, ask a stand-up comic, James, audiences have gone feral since lockdown. Speaking of stand-up comics, my friend Nick Revel has got a new show on Radio 4 tonight called Broken Dreamcatcher, which I cannot recommend highly enough. The man's a genius. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. Jack's in Bristol. Jack, what can you tell us?
Hi. Just when it got cut to you talking, it said, speaking of Brexit.
Yes. Well, what do you expect?
It's like, how dare you?
That's on a loop, mate. That's on a loop. Speaking of Brexit, they've got it. You phone in and to LBC, and they're waiting to put you through to somebody else. If you ring the main switchboard, that's just me going, speaking of Brexit. What do you want to say?
Well, okay. So I've been a pianist professionally since I was, I suppose, 15.
Gosh.
So I've been playing. I'm 35 now, and that's my job. I play 4 times a week, and I even did in lockdown. So when things started easing a bit in about July 2020, I started playing in pub gardens and things like that. So for what my instrument is, I'm lucky because, you know, the drummer in my band couldn't get work. But because it's that kind of backgroundy thing.
Yeah, I get it.
I could do it. But I have to say 100% COVID is due to the
decline.
The entitlement people have had. You
Really?
know, I was just saying to the producer, you get used to drunk people occasionally going, oh, play something we know. You know,
Yeah, she knows all about that.
It's like, yeah, whatever, you know. But people coming up to me, people coming up to my bandmates, thinking they can just halfway through the song, you know, as if we're a karaoke machine, going, you know, you've got to play this. I don't like this.
Wow.
You know, it's just like. Yeah,
and that didn't happen before. I mean, a distinct change in conduct, as you say. You've all every musician in the world, pretty much, has dealt with drunken patrons, but this is a different measure of.
But then also, you know, we talked to the bar staff in places, and they just said, the rudeness that the people behind the bar have to encounter.
Why are we so confident it's COVID? Because correlation is not causation. The timing might fit with this analysis, but why do we think the behaviour does? Why do we think the thing?
Well, I know that people have said to bar staff, going, we paid your wages, we paid furlough, so.
Oh really? I hadn't thought of that. Gosh.
Several times I've heard different people say that. That's why these people are being more and more rude to bar staff, because they're entitled. The weird thing is that when lockdown happened, what people kept people going, I suppose, were these live streams of gigging from your house or gigging from your garden or doing like plays. People were doing it all around the world. They were looking for entertainment because it was taken away from them. People didn't realise that the whole live experience was taken away, and then they would miss it. So people were just, I know DJs who were doing live DJ streams and stuff,
yes.
And people were donating on PayPal and stuff to keep them going. And as soon as things got opened up again, I don't know if it was taken for granted.
Is it ownership? We think they own you, or they behave. Well, that is real. And it hasn't peaked and come back down again? You're not seeing improvements. Are you seeing a general permanent change?
It depends on the type of. I play in quite high end places,
yes.
and I play in the polar opposite place.
Okay.
So, I just have to say, in general, it's since COVID has been noticeable.
That's interesting. And as I say, correlation is not causation. I won't bore you again with the lollipop drowning example of why correlation is not causation, because I explained it on yesterday's show. But can we be confident that it was COVID? What would be the psychological explanation of that? Lockdowns making us behave very differently, interacting very differently. But I don't think I came out of lockdown even more arrogant than I went into it. Admittedly, that would have been very hard. Harry's in Hepworth. Harry, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great to speak.
Thank you. You too.
I work for my family business. We have an ice cream shop.
Oh, lovely.
And you do notice that a lot of customers, they're really rude. It's almost as if basic manners have just gone out the window since COVID.
You would. So you were listening today and you went, God, he's right, that's it. Or had you already put two and two together? It's the relationship between the decline and the lockdown that I'm interested in.
Well, yeah, it's just I was driving and I thought I need to pull up and ring, because it's just noticed that before COVID everyone was so nice, and then you get to after COVID and it's just people can't, like, you'll have someone walk in the shop and you're like, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
And they won't respond to you. They'll come in, they'll just ask what they want, they won't even thank you, and then you get people sitting in and they'll leave such a mess, they won't clean it up or anything, and they just leave it all to you.
And that wasn't the same before. So people have forgotten, or they've never learned. It's hard to know the difference, isn't it? Whether or not these people would have behaved better before, or they've never really, they're younger perhaps, or they've never really observed or learned how to behave, so they just come in and behave quite ignorantly.
No, it's really strange. It just seems that people just forget, because honestly, I could never think of leaving a restaurant without, stacking the plates up, cleaning up after myself, and tucking the chairs underneath. But it just seems people completely forget to do that, and it's very mind.
Hang on a minute, Harry. You stack the plates up.
Well, yeah.
You're talking about. Sorry, you don't mean in a restaurant. You mean the people who are not putting their cartons and their containers away and just leaving rubbish on the table. You don't start stacking the crockery when you go out for dinner, do you?
No, it's just like it's not even like that. They'll leave stuff all over the floor.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I guess a good example would be a fast food place rather than an ice cream parlour, where you clear your table and put everything in the bin, because the bins are there. It's clearly obvious that you're supposed to clean up after yourself, and you're describing people that don't. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the business isn't in Hepworth, is it?
No, because we have a shop in Bakewell and a shop in Holmfirth.
Oh, okay, lovely. And what's it called?
Lick.
Lit.
Lick.
Lick.
It's completely dairy-free ice cream.
Oh, lovely.
We do find that we get a lot of pushback from that. And a lot of people, they come in, they ask, do you do ice cream? And then they see that it's dairy-free.
Yeah.
And they get very hostile about it. And
really?
I find it very weird, because if I walked in somewhere and they said, it's all dairy-free, I'd be, wow, that's amazing, that's great.
Yes, of course.
Because we do it for people with allergies, that
and the lactose intolerance, all those sort of things.
Yeah, and you get these people that are so lovely and they're just amazing. They tell you these stories of the kids that can't have the ice cream and they're so lovely to you, but you just get so many rude customers that just...
That's weird, isn't it?
It's not very nice.
What's your favourite flavour?
I'm a bit basic. I like mint choc chip.
Oh, I love mint choc chip, mate. That's absolute gold. That's absolutely delicious. And do you do specials? Do you do experiments and try new ones and stuff like that?
Well, it's my mum that makes the ice cream, and she does go a bit crazy sometimes. We did all pink ice cream for the Barbie film.
Oh, well done. Oh, I love it. Home, Firth and Bakewell, did you say?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Lovely part of the world. Take care. So I was going to ask if you were of Italian heritage, but it's obviously quite a recent family business rather than one that goes back, 100 years.
No, yeah, only 2 years, so
fantastic. Okay, get on with it. I love that. I'll see you one day, no doubt. I think we're in Derbyshire in half term. 28 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's a sort of Derbyshire-Yorkshire border, that, isn't it? I like this conversation. So we're getting the yes, it is, but we are not getting the causation. We're getting the correlation, but we're not getting the causation. Quite a lot of people having terrible experiences at the cinema, and that's got to be behaviour, but it's not necessarily lockdown. It's as much to do with streaming. And a quick shout out to Sean and Maxine at the Maltings in York from Cliff, who's obviously a regular. He says, it's a real shame they're retiring, James. We'll miss reading the press on the wall in the loos. And it's stags and hens generally that are the big problem, as well as drunken visitors. And the landlord, this gentleman, Sean, the landlord who's retiring, saying that behaviour has really deteriorated since lockdown, makes some fascinating points. You know, you go on TripAdvisor and people are expressing outrage for being told not to swear. I love this idea. It's a pub where you're not allowed to swear. You're not allowed to sing. There's no television, no music, no stag parties, no hen do's, and for the avoidance of doubt, no fancy dress. I love it already. Seriously, I have a table reserved in the corner. And so there's someone on TripAdvisor expressing horror that they'd been asked to leave for putting their feet on a bar stool. Now, the landlord says, surely anyone who reads that is going to think, right, that's brilliant, I'm going there. And I would have thought so. I remember the first time it was explained to me why you shouldn't put your feet on a seat. I was a teenager on a train with my feet on a seat. And somebody said, what if a lady in a white skirt comes and sits down on there and you've left mud off your shoes on? You just go, crikey, yes, I never thought of it like that. Sorry. Or you go on TripAdvisor to complain that you've been told to get your blooming great plates of meat off a bar stool. I do enjoy that. 11:30 is the time. Mystery Hour with us at 12. More of this after the very latest headlines with Thomas Watt. 11:32 is the time. I can't find that Thucydides quote that I always use at this point about the young people in, 2500 BC being out of control because they didn't know how to behave. But I've got a Plutarch one, which would be a bit later. Some of this stuff's amazing. You think this is 2,000 years ago, and then you read right-wing tabloids, and you think, good Lord, we haven't progressed at all, have we? I like this. Listen to this. Children ought to be led to honourable practices by means of encouragement and reasoning, and most certainly not by blows and ill treatment. But this one here, children are to be... You remember, you get Daily Mail stuff complaining about children studying certain subjects at universities. This is from 2,000 years ago, give or take. Children are to be won to follow liberal studies by exhortations and rational motives, and on no account to be forced thereto by whipping. And I quite liked this one as well, which mothers ought to bring up and nurse their own children, for they bring them up with greater affection and with greater anxiety, as loving them from the heart, and so to speak, every inch of them, warning against, I suppose, servants and nannies. Still a modern conversation in the context of childcare. How do we know that behaviour has got worse because of lockdown? Mark in Bristol makes a powerful point. He says, when people are worried and scared about everything that's going on around them, as is the case in the UK today, they don't see a way forward. Brexit, COVID, climate change, cost of living, disenfranchised leadership. We cease to care about our own behaviour and allow ourselves to vent our frustrations without thought. We cease to be aware of how we behave because everything seems hopeless and irrelevant. I'm not so sure. I don't know that the most entitled people I encounter are the ones that are displaying signs of hopelessness. I really don't. A lot of you telling me about the fight at a Barbie screening in Maidstone, which is indeed picked up in the article by Stuart Heritage, that that prompted part of this conversation. And Simon in Woking makes a brilliant point, actually. I do believe this, although you're perfectly entitled to say, well, you would, wouldn't you? He says, I think that any behaviour or respect issues could be entirely down to government attitudes. And this is before 30p Leenock made his latest contribution to the public discourse. You see the utter contempt for basic standards displayed by Boris Johnson and his supporters, right across the media as well, of course, not just in Parliament, but literally showing contempt, in contempt. And then when he was found to be in contempt, responding in a way that put him even further into contempt, and then just waltzing off arrogantly and angrily into the political wilderness. I mean, if the pinnacle of power in this country, if the actual Prime Minister can display utter contempt for the most basic parameters of civilised behaviour, whether in Parliament or out, why the hell should anybody else behave themselves or mind their P's and Q's? I think there's something in that. I really do. And a lot of people, of course, reporting that the teachers have been describing for some time a huge decline in conduct for post-COVID children. Oh, I'm gonna hop to the second line actually, because one of my favourite actors has rung in, Martin Shaw. I presume, Martin, that you've rung in to tell me that audiences ain't what they used to be.
Well, you're absolutely right, James. And actually, eloquently as ever, you've just put the case beautifully.
Well, that's very kind.
About the reasons why. I mean, when the government and when our leaders show such contempt for us, it's a kind of a subconscious reaction, for a lot of people to say, well, why the hell should I behave properly?
Have you picked up on it? Are you seeing it in the stalls?
Oh, God, yes. But, I mean, I've been feeling it. I think everybody in my profession has been feeling this for a long time. But it has got significantly worse since COVID. And then even more significantly worse since our leaders are betraying us in the way that they have. I think it's just natural human behaviour to subconsciously go into the why should mode of things.
Yes. Or just, do as I am, not as I say, I suppose. You just see it and think that's how people behave. That is it. That is normal.
I know. I mean, the effect of a mobile phone in an audience, I mean, it is absolutely catastrophic.
Yes, of course it is. I can only imagine what it does to your concentration.
Well, it's not just our concentration, because you rely upon the group concentration from the audience. I mean, the audience is actually part of the play. They are there with you. And if that concentration is broken around an area, you've got a block of about a dozen people who are no longer listening. And who are actually in a sense of indignation. And then that will spread across the audience. Sorry, James, go on.
No, I'd just say Julian Suffolk's just texted to say it's a Bullingdon Club mentality.
Exactly. There you go. There you go. Eloquent as ever. I mean, I agree with you entirely. I'm a big fan, by the way.
Well, you're very kind. Big fan of yours, Martin, as well. And I think you're in Windsor at the moment. I'll establish precisely when and where shortly. But I'm just looking at other stories around when there was a fight at a performance of The Bodyguard in Manchester when people were asked just to stop singing along. Jersey boys halted in Edinburgh after a fight erupts in crowds. What are you getting? Because a phone, to be fair, it's ignorant behaviour to have left it on, but it's not a conscious decision to it. People have generally done that by accident. What are we witnessing? Are you seeing people chatting or people just looking at their phones, people being disrespectful to their fellow audience members as well as the actors on the stage?
Yes, well, I haven't noticed people being disrespectful to fellow members of the audience, but the incidence of bad phone behaviour has just gone up exponentially in the last few months, in the last year or so. I mean, the cough used to be the enemy.
Of course.
I mean, it always confused me that people would bark like a wolfhound in an audience where they wouldn't actually do it in their own living room.
Yes, you're right. Actually, I've never thought of it like that before. You're in the middle. Well, you're in a run of Alone Together by Simon Williams at the Theatre Royal in Windsor at the moment.
That's correct.
Lovely stuff. Are you enjoying it?
Yes, very much. It's very interesting, unusual play, and we've had great responses. So that's very nice to do that.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. You and Jenny Seagrove, there it is, and that is a lovely way to spend an evening at the moment, I imagine.
Yes, it is. In spite of the mobile phones, and in spite of the strategic coughing. But yes, it's what I've done for 60 years, and so I wouldn't do anything else.
You should come on Full Disclosure. Would you come on Full Disclosure? Would you come on my podcast interview? Because that's, as you say, you're one of those actors that everybody has a sort of. Well, I'm not going to embarrass you on air, Martin. Sure, I'll let you go off. But I'd love to have.
No, don't. Let me answer straight away, like a shot.
Oh well, stay on the line. We'll get that sorted, and we'll do it as soon as you've finished in Windsor. If you are going to go to the Theatre Royal in Windsor, make sure to see Alone Together, starring Martin Shaw and Jenny Seagrove. Make sure you turn your bloody phone off before you go into the auditorium. That would be my final word on the matter. Martin, thank you. Jane's in Stanmore. Jane, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm a regular theatre goer. I go to the theatre at least 4 or 5 times a month. I was at the Old Vic recently on a Saturday matinee with my daughter to see Groundhog Day, which is amazing.
I want to see that. Actually.
A woman came, party 4 came to sit on my left, and the woman next to me, when the show started, just was chatting with her friend.
Yeah.
Next to her. So that really riled me up. So I shushed her, but she just continued to talk.
So the show has started, and they're talking as if they're watching television.
They're just chatting away.
Like Gogglebox. It could be Gogglebox. Maybe Gogglebox is to blame for this. Everyone thinks it's perfectly reasonable to have a natter while you're watching something.
It's disrespectful to the actors on stage.
Well, of course it is. What did you do? What did you do?
So after the second shush, she turned round to me and said aggressively, "If you shush me again, I'm going to talk throughout the whole show."
What a peasant!
I was so shocked that I didn't say a word. Anyway, she did stop.
Right.
Eventually, and then at the interval,
yes, my
daughter and I got up to go out to get an ice cream. She turned round to me and said, "You rude bee."
Ooh, yes.
"Don't you dare shush me."
Blimey.
I wasn't going to go down to her level. All I said to her was, "Don't talk during the play."
Yes.
So she was calling out over across the aisle, "You rude bee."
How ignorant.
And I was just saying, don't speak
Don't talk
in a play.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that, because it gets the adrenaline up, doesn't it? It gets the heart racing, whether you want it to or not. It disturbs your equilibrium.
Absolutely. And I actually went to see the manager during the interval, and I told him what had happened. He moved us.
Well, that was good of him as well. How confident are you that it's a part? Because I think we missed the political angle here, and I appreciate not everybody shares Martin Shaw and my view of the current government, so not everybody's going to like that angle. But do you think it's a post-COVID thing or a broader?
No, not particularly. No.
You've always had ignorant people. I just guess the argument is there's a few more of them around than before, and they don't know how to behave in some contexts.
Exactly. And also regarding the mobile phone. So, the last couple of years, people are just on their mobile phones a lot during a play.
They can't leave it in their pocket. That's a deliberate choice, and that's the light. So, even if they've turned off the phone and put it on airplane mode, the distraction caused by a light. They make a point of doing it in the cinema now. They have those little announcements beforehand. But a lot of people don't pay them the slightest bit of attention. A lot of love coming in for thank you, Jane. You're lucky to see all those shows. It's very much on. Speaking of Full Disclosure, I want Tim Minchin. If anyone knows Tim Minchin, who wrote Groundhog Day and, of course, Matilda, I'd love him to come on Full Disclosure as well. It's great, this. We could sign up all of next month if we carry on like this. A lot of love coming in for Martin. Nigel in Belfast writes, no disrespect, James, but how marvellous to hear the great Martin Shaw on your show. His audiobook recordings of Tolkien's Hobbit and Silmarillion are absolutely unparalleled. Please thank him on my behalf. I just did. Richard is in St Albans. Richard, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. First thing, Martin Shaw, absolute icon.
Isn't he?
Always remember him from The Professionals. He's going to hate me say that, but
he's done lots more. But I'm sure,
absolutely,
I'm sure he's used to people remembering that.
Exactly. I'm going to go and see the play. Right? Why did I ring in? Why have people forgotten how to engage with themselves and with their community? So I think I'm going to try stick my neck out here and try. So
right,
COVID,
you've only got a minute.
All right, COVID has let us, it's made us more insular, right?
Yes.
We get lost in our phones and our tablets. We know that. We flit around the screens. There's no barriers. Our attention spans are gone. We can say what we like when we like. We can comment.
Attention span is part of it, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
And there's no checks and balances. And we see this. So actually, there's a lot of research on the rise of narcissism because people have moved from the villages into towns. There's less checks and balances. Okay, so people have learned to behave differently, and what they've done is they've taken that online behaviour and they've translated it into the real world. So I think the lack of spatial awareness has disappeared. The entitlement, the expression is there. So
this is not
standing in top of they're standing in stupid places as if they're the only person on the planet.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. I've really noticed that. But this is not an unsympathetic analysis. This is seeing people in a sense as being the consequences of their changing environment rather than being willfully entitled or willfully obnoxious. And that's probably quite helpful because, some people, as Jane said, there's always been some people who are unpleasant and ignorant and arrogant and entitled. But for some people, they don't know that they're doing anything wrong. It doesn't occur to them that they're upsetting other patrons or performers.
Yeah. And the other side of the coin is that this is habits, right? People love the book. They all love reading the books about habits and how to be a Navy SEAL, etc. But what they're doing is they've been habitualised and they're getting their dopamine hits from the likes, etc. And but they're not getting that when they go into the real world. So they're not getting those same hits.
And they can't put it down. No, I hear you.
And you see that in politicians as well. So I think what's happening is it goes deeper than that because the politicians behave that way as well. They think they can do what they like, and so they're picking up on a ready-made audience. It just goes with it. That's why we don't have riots in the streets here. But yeah, we need a new social contract, and we need to teach people some new behaviours. And
that is where you do wonder whether we're just looking at the ebb and flow of the human condition, and things do come back to equilibriums. But yesterday's conversation, bizarrely, was it yesterday or the day before, about smartphones and children and the psychological research into that does lend itself to the idea that this isn't just another video killed the radio star moment, that there is something fundamentally changing, and COVID plus technology perhaps plus a politics, I'm afraid. Even if you're still in the Boris Johnson fan club, you can't deny the fact that the man behaved with utter contempt for all rules and requirements, all standards. Thank you, Rich. That's a brilliant analysis. This is lovely as well from Julie. At my son's graduation at the beautiful Philharmonic Hall in Liverpool, during the actual ceremony, while young people were on stage performing, the people around us were actually making and answering phone calls. The Dean had asked everyone to clap throughout and show respect for the milestone moment. It would be the graduation, not a performance, forgive me. Saying it would last only for 30 minutes. So, not that hard to keep quiet, but it happened regardless. It was incredibly rude. I guess it's social media and mobile phones more than COVID. On it goes. 11:47 is the time. It's 11:51. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't think that the mobile phone is a subject in and of itself. I think with the relationship that children have with them increasingly concerns us, as we discussed earlier in the week. But mobile phones in public spaces, it's usually accidental when it rings. But there's a different thing that we hadn't touched on before, pulling it out and using it. Is that linked to behaviour during COVID, when you stopped thinking about how your conduct would impact on others, or at least on people you didn't know. So some of us spent 18 months on and off, not thinking about anyone else outside of our own home, our own bubble. You'd think, why would I? So you just reach a sort of, I don't know what you would call it, a form of psychological blinker or straitjacket where you're not conscious of anybody around. And then you move back into public spaces, and you take this psychological condition with you. I'm not conscious of people around me. I thought when Richard mentioned spatial awareness, that really resonated with me, because that's when I'm at my most Meldrewish, when people stop at the bottom of the stairs at an underground station here in London, for example, and you can't go, and you just think, how can you think that, especially if it's a large group, and you just sort of, but the only answer to that is it hasn't occurred to people that this is a really silly way to behave, which could be in part due to a lack of spatial awareness, which could go back to lockdown, when you ceased to be as aware of your surroundings because they were always the blooming same. They never changed. That's a sort of physical element of the psychological condition. I like this from Emily. I'm a volunteer theatre usher, she writes. The mobile phone is the bane of my life. The mantra is no photography, filming, and phones off, or otherwise I'll embarrass you with my torch, all in a good-hearted manner. The excuses for using a phone are particularly pathetic. I only go to the Playhouse and Curzon cinemas now, as the customers rarely use their phones during films. Even at classical concerts, I've seen people pull their phones out. It drives me mad. I get it. Wayne's in Kingsbridge, the pizza king of Kingsbridge. Wayne, what would you like to say?
I think this is a combination of COVID, of the rise of online ordering, and just general changes in people's behaviour as we kind of get used to being able to get things fairly quickly. Your next day delivery from Amazon.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. A sort of changing relationship with, can we say, the service sector, I suppose, in general?
Yeah.
Like, a changing nature of the service sector, as you say. It's not just at the end of the phone, it's at the end of your garden path. It's at your front door within hours now.
Yeah, and we found as well that customers who place an order from us over the phone,
yes,
because we tell them a much more accurate time of how long their order's going to be,
yes,
tend to be much more accepting of waiting a couple of hours for a pizza,
right,
compared to someone who places an order online and it says estimated 1 hour, 20-minute wait.
Yeah.
Or like on Tuesday night, when a customer selected delivery for 7:20 and then phoned us up at 10:07 querying why their order hadn't arrived.
Would that not just be a mistake, though, or were they actually...
I have no idea.
Trying it on.
I spoke to them. I'm really sorry. It is placed for 7:20. Your slot is in there, and we are so busy. There is no way that I can squeeze it out any sooner. If I can, I will, but it's highly unlikely it will get to you around about 7:20. And my driver clicked delivered on the delivery app at 19:20.
It's a little list there. I liked it. I just want to pick up on a couple of other things that were on it. I hadn't thought of the sort of click and collect culture that we've got now, or click and deliver culture, but that does encourage people perhaps to forget the humanity of the process by which a pizza arrives at their front door.
I think it does, and I found myself, and I've changed my personal habits because of the impact that it's made to us, but I found myself not ordering properly. So not paying as much attention when I've been placing an order on my phone, whether it be for food or ordering something off the web. And I've ended up ordering the wrong thing just because I'm rushing to get to that final point and finish it. And there's nobody there saying that doesn't work with that. So I ordered a label printer to prevent mistakes from happening. So I ordered a label printer and I ordered the wrong labels.
I see, and if you were dealing with a human being, you couldn't possibly have done that, because they just said, why are you buying labels that don't fit in your label printer? Yes, and that,
exactly.
that diminishes it from the other side of the equation, doesn't it? It changes the...
Yeah, and then we've also got people who... I've got one customer who turns up, and the minute that we tell her how long it's going to be, she says to her watch, set a timer for 20 minutes, or set a timer for 10 minutes. I'm like, that's great behaviour. But then I've got other people who we say, right, it's going to be 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. They turn up 10 minutes later and then get a bit shirty that their food's not ready. I feel like your perception of time. I wish I could do everything that was due in 25 minutes in 10 minutes.
And we are measuring a decline here. You're not just describing the status quo since you opened up the place. I feel like your therapist today, Wayne. I'm happy to play that role on this occasion. I know you do a lot for the community down in Kingsbridge, so I'm happy to be your whipping post.
It's very strange because sometimes we'll go for weeks where we have nothing but positive, and there's never any blip, and then all of a sudden it's almost like there's a certain type of person around, or the weather has done something to everyone. All of a sudden, everyone is an enemy.
In my line of work, it's a full moon usually that prompts a slight change.
When is that due?
I don't know when it's due. You must look up this article about the landlord at the Maltings in York, because there's some lovely detail in it that you will appreciate about Sean Colling and his wife. And there's another one about the chili. So they've got this framed on the wall in the pub. Someone's saying, "Don't touch the chili," with lots of exclamation marks. "The chips are amazing, the chili unbearable. I lost the hearing in my ears. Seriously, I kid you not. We were given sour cream. I think a fire extinguisher would have been better." And the menu, according to the landlord points out, says the chili is cooked by Maxine, the landlady, and it's very hot. It's a hot chili. You put a post on them. I mean, what do you expect a chili to be? Dorrit's in Brockley. Dorrit, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I was going to say public transport. People think it's all right to do FaceTime conversations on the bus. So as well as, hearing people anyway on the mobile phone, but you have people actually FaceTiming at the top of their voices. So as well as hearing them,
I find that very odd. I find that very. I mean, but you mean FaceTime? You mean a video call? But I find it odd even to conduct a conversation on speakerphone.
Yeah, there's that, and it happens more and more. And it's the most annoying thing that's happening, and I think it has happened a lot since the pandemic. People, because I always think to myself, why can't they have that conversation in their house? Why are they waiting until they're on a bus or something like that?
Or even just do it on a phone. Like everybody has always done. I don't know. We're never going to pin down for sure the COVID relationship, but it's interesting that both the Guardian writer, talking about his experiences at the cinema, and the landlord with 31 years on the clock hanging up his beer mat in York. We wish him all the best for the future, of course. Both credit COVID with having prompted a change in behaviour. Go on, I'll squeeze in one more. Michelle's in Hanwell. Have I got time to squeeze Michelle in? I haven't really, have I? But I've said your name now, Michelle, so it would be rude not to. Make it snappy.
We have a bunch of Philistines in government. That's our problem. We do not respect the creative arts anymore. And so people sitting in the audience think that they could be up on stage doing the same thing. Someone's singing in Bodyguard because they think they're just as good as the person. They've been watching TikTok videos, making TikTok videos at home, and they think they're as good as the person standing on stage.
Yeah, I think there's probably something in that. You're a performer yourself, I sense.
Yes, 40 years. We've always dealt with people speaking, but now it's like people feel like they could just talk through or sing along with you because they're just as good as you.
You're a singer. You sing on stage.
Yes.
Right, and people do, and you've noticed this, right? Because I find it staggering. People this sense that you're just a sort of human karaoke machine.
Yeah, people come up and say, "Oh, my mate's a singer. Can he get up and do a song?" I say to them, "What's your job? Yeah. Can I come and do your job tomorrow?" This is a proper job,
I like that. Where's your next gig? You don't have to tell me. You might not want to.
I'll be at the Ned.
There you go. Singing at the Ned shortly. Thank you for that, Michelle. 12 noon is the time. 0344. No, hang on. It's Mystery Hour next.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 12 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour is it's upon us, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. It's very straightforward, but surprisingly fun, and also illuminating. It involves you ringing in with a mystery, a question to which you know there is almost certainly an answer, but you're dashed if you can work out what it is. You may have put some effort into trying to find out. You may have put precisely zero effort into trying to find out. The point is that there is a space, there is an answer-shaped space in your life that somebody else will be able to fill. And they fill it, of course, by dialing 0345 6060 973. The best contribution, and the management's decision is final, and the management is me. The best contribution of the hour receives a brand spanking new Mystery Hour board game. Soon to be seen at the Toy Fair, the Toy and Game Fair at Olympia in January, where I will be holding Stephen Mulhern's jacket as people pose for him with selfies. The terms and conditions are at the website. I always forget that bit. It's a proper grown-up competition, this, with terms and conditions. And if you want to find out more about the ball game, you can go to mysteryhour.co.uk, where you can buy it and enjoy hours and hours and hours of family fun. I think that's pretty much it. We'll probably just crack on, shall we? I think. I'll just read this quickly, which came in. I was about to say Sally. It came in from Sally, but the word is actually sadly. So whoever wrote this wrote, I would have thought lockdown would have made society more compassionate and self-aware. It seems to be the opposite, sadly. I thought that furlough would make people more sympathetic to the welfare state. I thought that realising that the government does have to help people when they're in a bit of bother would actually change the political nature of those sort of conversations, or the emotional nature of those political conversations. Shows what I know, Doesn't it? We had a caller in the last hour saying that the people are abusing pub staff on the grounds that we paid your wages during lockdown. We paid your furlough. So there it is. Let's crack straight on. James is in Haywards Heath. James, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
At school, secondary school, I got sent out of my physics lesson for asking this question because my physics teacher thought I was making it up.
Oh.
So hopefully you don't do the same. When a car accelerates and you're looking at the wheels, so the alloy wheels,
yes,
they go forward, as you'd expect. But at one point, at a certain speed, they appear to go backwards.
Yes.
And I wanted to know why that was.
I think I know. I also think you probably won't accept my answer. But
go for it.
I'll try. It's because of the speed with which your brain can process what's coming through your eyes.
Okay.
So think of it. Go on.
Okay, go on.
Well, so think of like snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
So if your brain was processing the snaps as quickly as the wheel was turning, then it would constantly be moving forward. But when you're only getting one snap in 5, then you can have an appearance of going backwards.
Okay. You're right. I don't really get it, but that's probably down to me.
Hang on. Let me try again. While drawing a diagram in the studio that I will endeavour to describe to you. So here are, let's say, 10 pictures of 12, because then you can imagine a clock.
A clock face, yeah.
So 12 pictures of a clock face,
and
you are only seeing 12 and 7.
Okay.
So because 7 is more than halfway round, it looks like it's or 12 and 5 might work better, but whatever works better for you, it looks like it's going backwards, not forwards.
And then it reverts back to going forwards again.
When it slows down and your brain is processing it better again.
See, I think it does it. It's only for a period of time. And then it goes back to looking like it's forward.
Well, there's no guarantee that it would look like it was going backwards, is there? Because you're seeing 2 out of 10 snapshots, and they could convey the image that it's going forwards. But in some circumstances, because you're not seeing all of the snapshots, it will appear to be going backwards.
Okay, I wish he'd at least endeavoured rather than sending me out the room, but I'm delighted you've at least...
Well, I think it was a valid question. I mean, he probably thought you were being mischievous, and let's be honest, James, there was probably some history there, mate. I doubt that he was making that decision entirely in the moment. There was probably some context, a little bit of history, a little bit of reasoning. Yes, but I'm not going to take the round of applause because someone else will be able to explain it better than I can. And given that you've been
for years,
given that you've been waiting all these years for your answer, I will make sure you get something of a slightly higher calibre than I have been able to provide. James is in Malaga. James, what would you go? Question or answer?
Question, James.
Two Jameses. So that's 3 James. James in Croydon. No, we've got another James up next. James in Croydon. Are you there? Oh, that's John. So where did I get the other James from then? But never mind.
Malaga.
Sorry. I think I'm having a bit of a moment today. I don't know what's going on. James in Malaga. Question or answer?
It's a question,
yes.
And my question is why is champagne the drink of celebration?
Cost.
Cost?
Yeah. I really appreciate the power of your response there. That was a lovely cost. Yeah, of course it is.
No.
And froth, you can shake it up, baby, and get a nice...
but someone somewhere along the line or some decided that it was going to be the drink of celebration. It's not... That's why,
but it's a celebration, so get me the finest wine. Get me the finest wines known to man, and the finest wines known to man for a long time were the fizzy ones because they were much harder to produce and therefore more expensive, and therefore when it's a special occasion we'll get the champagne in.
I don't think Dom Perignon was thinking that myself.
What do you think he was thinking?
I think all I do know is that I think he got the idea of making champagne from cider, but
cider.
But yeah, I know I have to say it that way. I don't know. I don't know why it is a drink of celebration. I know there's cultures that don't drink, but invariably, when there's a wedding or
Champagne.
A high.
But why are you rejecting my theory? It is only a theory. I've realised that because the board game, James, depends upon wrong answers, I have to start trying to answer all the questions again, even though I may get it wrong. So I have to put up answers that then turn out to be wrong. But on this occasion, I think it must be right. What other reason could there be?
Well, there's more affordable champagnes than, say, the high-end brands. You can get
that's true
own brands from.
Maybe
so
it's the pop then.
It's
the pop of the cork. It's the celebratory nature of the popping cork like a firework.
Yeah, but cider does the same, doesn't it?
I mean, James, there is nothing to stop you celebrating major milestones in your life with cider, mate. It's not a rule.
No,
because you're sounding
you're
sounding a bit aggrieved now.
Champagne.
You're sounding a bit aggrieved now on behalf of cider.
Yes, but it is. I have heard the term "poor man champagne" is cider. There's a few songs, and wasn't there a Lily Allen song where she said to it? I think so.
There might have been. All right, I'll put it on the board. Why champagne for the special occasions?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Are you on holiday in Malaga, or do you live there?
We do live here, yes.
Got retired or working or?
Sort of semi-retired, really, but nice. And it's incredibly hot, and it's not as enjoyable as people think it is.
No, in fact, there are some stories in town today about future holidays being possibly moving further north in Europe, sort of Belgium and Poland becoming holiday destinations because we're not really built for the levels of heat that southern Europe is getting at the moment. But stay safe, James. 12 after 12 is the time. John's in Croydon. John, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
Why do moles accumulate more hair or regularly accumulate hair? So say, for example, if it's on your arm, even though it might be hair there already, it'll be more sort of dense and thick, the hair on the mole, for example.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. I presume that it's the same reason you've got a mole, so there must be something to do with melanin and hair. Melanin must be like hair fertilizer, John.
This is part of you having to answer more questions for the board game, isn't it, James?
Yes, it is, John.
Can we put it on there for an expert to answer? It's been rattling my brain. I didn't want to go to people because I thought that...
Could we spend 40 seconds or so actually just sort of paying a bit of respect to my suggestion or not?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
That sounds feasible, James. Yeah, that sounds...
It does. Well, if something is happening in your skin that creates a mole, and something is happening in your skin that creates hairs in the same place as the mole, ergo, it's probably the same thing in your skin. And the thing that creates the mole is the melanin, which leads me inexorably to the conclusion that the melanin is also having an impact upon the hair follicle production.
Very well done, James. Brilliant.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a good answer, right?
This is why you get the big bucks, mate.
It is why I get the big bucks. Well, I've got a whole game named after me. But I'm not going to take a round of applause at this point, John, because I sense that you'd be quite offended if I did.
Let down rather than offended, but yeah.
I don't want to let you down, John. I don't want to let you down.
James.
No, that's all right. It's on the board. Why do you get hairy moles? 0345 6060 973. Why is champagne the tipple of choice for celebrations? And why, when you look at wheels turning, do they often appear to be going backwards? And I'm fairly confident that the answers I've given to all three of those questions are wrong. But that's the nature of Mystery Hour, you see. 12:15 is the time. The number you need to answer any of those, or indeed to pose a question of your own, is 0345 6060 973.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 16 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Lots of nice questions in place. I like this from Terry. I've just bought tickets to your Manchester gig, James, and tickets 2 nights later to watch Metallica for an anniversary present. What strange bedfellows. Well, I don't think so, frankly, Terry. I think that, a night with me in Manchester, talking about my new book in November, followed by a night with Metallica. I think that's called covering all the bases rather than strange bedfellows. You're nourishing different parts of your cultural appetites. 17 after 12 is the time. Harry is in Tamworth. Question or answer, Harry?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Harry.
Okay, so after a sweaty night's sleep, which hasn't happened very often this summer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
When I wake up, my left armpit smells worse than the right armpit.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and I know it's a small sample size because my girlfriend didn't believe me, But then she woke up the other day and she also performed a sniff test on her, which was verified pretty disgustingly by myself.
Okay.
And her left armpit also smelt worse than the right. And I want to know why.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you spoon?
Spoon? Yeah, but I'm the little spoon.
Well, I didn't need that extra detail, but when you...
I mean, you can picture it if you like.
I am. She's a big girl, is she?
No.
I know. But do you spoon in the same direction every night?
No.
Are you sure? Do you have a favoured direction for spooning?
It's hard to say because we don't live together at the moment, so we kind of,
But you've only conducted these experiments when you have spent the night together.
I would say that I've also conducted the experiment on my own as well.
Oh, I see. All right.
It's something which I came up with a few weeks ago.
That doesn't undo my slowly germinating theory, which is that you favour one side when you're sleeping.
Yeah, I suppose I could do more research and see whether it is just after sleep or whether, going to the gym or something.
Oh, I thought it was. I beg your pardon. I thought it was just a morning thing that we'd established so far.
I've only done the sniff test in the morning.
I think it's going to be that.
Correct.
I think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be the ventilation issue.
Ventilation issue.
Or something. I mean, it could be the other way around, but the side you sleep on is going to have a different armpit result than the side that you're not sleeping on, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, it could, but I'd say I sleep in many different positions. But then again, I suppose in my sleep I'll probably default to one. But could it be circulation?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I don't know that this answer is one that admits this question is one that admits a definitive answer. I like it. I tell you what, though, I don't know whether this will come as a shock to you, Harry. You're getting a lot of solidarity for being the male little spoon. I had no idea there was such a large community. David says male little spoon pride.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, there it is. I shall have to experiment.
I wonder how many people around the nation are sniffing their armpits right now.
Well, I don't know that. It's one way of establishing whether you've got this new strain of COVID or not, I suppose. But you shouldn't really have smelly armpits at all in normal circulation. Like now, I'm sitting in a studio. I think it's probably going to be a morning thing rather than a post-exercise thing. But I will put. Why does Harry's left armpit smell more strongly than his right armpit? All right.
I hope it's not just me.
Well, we'll find out. Well, I don't know. It might be just you that's checked. Why would you check?
Well, you got to check these things,
No, you don't. Why would you check? What did you think? Did you sort of think? Gosh, you turned your head slightly and noticed a change in atmosphere and thought, gosh, that's odd. I seem to be smelling a little bit more when I face this way and then you went in. But why would you do it?
Quite possibly, it's something that I noticed quite a while ago. So yes. I can't quite pinpoint the exact moment when I realised, but I just thought of it the other day when I was listening to Mystery Hour last week, and I thought that would be a great question.
That is a mystery, you thought to yourself, and here you are. Here you are. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, Harry. I'm surprised you got past the quality control that is supposed to be in place, but I'm glad you did.
Well, maybe the producers have the same symptoms. Maybe they want to find out too.
I don't want to think about that, mate. But I will. Why is Harry's left armpit smellier than his right armpit? As far as we know, after sleeping. Okay. Louise is in Aberdeen. Louise, question or answer?
Question, James, please.
Carry on.
Years ago, we used to take our 4 kids camping to France with all our camping equipment and stay on small campsites.
Oh, Lordy.
I know, it was great. Absolutely brilliant. We get to Stonehaven. Are we there yet? However, on some of the campsites, there would be mice, and you would see them come up, through the floor of the tent.
Okay, what, field mice?
Field mice.
Yeah,
field
okay.
Mice.
Yeah,
well,
that's
I hope
nice.
They were. So we would speak to the campsite owner, and this happened on maybe 3 or 4 different campsites, and they always said the same thing, which was, where you get mice, you don't get rats.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to know whether that's true or whether it's only true in France.
Well, I think that we may have a category error here, because I think that would be referring to domiciles, to buildings.
Ah.
Because there's no way that an entire French meadow could be rat-free as a consequence of there being 2 dormice in it, is there?
Well, I think there were more than that. I mean, the mice that we had in various campsites were fairly prolific.
And did you ever see a rat?
I never saw a rat.
But it's an indoor-outdoor thing as well. So it's, albeit that it's a campsite, it's an outdoor environment.
I mean, they would have buildings or, toilet blocks and places you could sit, but no glamping.
We want to examine the broad claim that where there are mice, there aren't rats. But I think it is usually talking about. So a pest control person might say, if you get them to come and look at some droppings, they say, well, that's mice droppings. But the good news is, if you've got mice, you haven't got rats. I don't think they'd say that in a field.
Okay.
But I'm going to put it out to the experts.
Thank you very much, James.
No, thank you very much. Do you have more enjoyable holidays now, I hope, Louise?
I had lots of enjoyable holidays, but, the camping ones were great because the kids met other kids.
Oh, that's true.
They were brilliant.
You did have a sort of built-in social life, and that meant that the mum and dad got a little bit more time.
The kids were happy. They made up a language called Frangeldeutsch. And, they just all had an absolutely brilliant time. And if you cooked bacon in the morning, you could upset a whole campsite.
Yes, I can imagine. Or delight, or create envy, I suppose. Thank you, Louise. Mice and rats, is it true? If you've got mice, you can't get rats. What's the truth of that? Lots of pest control experts listen to this programme, so no doubt we'll get to the bottom of it. Why does Harry's left armpit smell worse than his right armpit? Why does John have hairy moles? That's a more general question. Hopefully they both are, otherwise it'd be a bit weird. Why do we use champagne for celebrations, and why does it sometimes look like wheels are going backwards? Thank goodness for that. The grown-ups have arrived. Hal is in Brighton. Professor Hal is in Brighton. It's going to be the wheels question.
It is, for the second time I posit.
I know, but I think we've been doing it so long now, we don't need to be embarrassed about repetition or possibly Hal point it out at all.
No, but it's a nice question.
It is a nice question.
There's lots and lots of science going on. Yeah. And you're not going to like this.
No,
you're not going to like this.
What?
I think that the OP, the original contributor, I think they've seen in the street alloy wheels looking like they're going backwards, but they haven't. They've seen it on film, on TV.
That was it, yes.
No, and I'll explain why.
Yes, no, that was it. That's what I forgot. You're right. You're exactly right. Go on.
Right, so the TV thing is called the cartwheel effect, and it's most noticeable in 1940s westerns when the cartwheels were going round, but they weren't going round as quickly as the frame rate of the film.
That was it, yeah.
And therefore, each time the next frame comes up, the cartwheel hasn't quite caught up, so it appears to be going backwards. Now, I think I got pulled up on Twitter about this because someone said, "Oh no, I hang around Red Hill Aerodrome," and as you might imagine, a chap like me looks at helicopters and propellers and asks science questions, and they absolutely go round and then they blur into a single disc. And there's two bits of evidence for this. Because if people say, "Oh no, I've seen," there's two things. You know the colour wheel thing. You spin a colour wheel and it ends up looking white.
Yes.
We don't see the colour wheel going backwards. At some point, our eyes just say, "You know what?
Can't
it's all
be doing
bled
with
into
this.
white."
I can't be doing with this. Say your eyes say.
Yeah. But the second one is it's a really lovely thing on trains. If you look into someone's eyes across the table and train.
Look into my eyes.
No, and you look at their eyes and they're looking at the window. You see their eyes jerking back to make. You don't notice you're doing it, but their eyes jerk back. It's called nystagmus, and it's a way that we can stitch together a series of pictures to make it into one continuous vista. Now, don't do it to someone you don't know because they'll think that's a bit strange. But next time you're on the train with Mrs. O'Brien, for example, look into her eyes as she looks out the window, and you'll see them jerking faster than you can imagine. So it is about frame rates, as you've said, and you have to sit down and work it out. That
they'd have to be have their back, but they'd have to be facing the engine for that to happen, I think.
Well, if they look out at right angles to the direction of travel.
Right angles is fine. Yeah, okay.
looking at the sort of the houses or the fields, whatever, passing, your eyes keep flicking back to the previous scene, and it's so interesting. I'm sure it's on YouTube, but it's much more relevant if you see someone doing it. It's very, very interesting. That's called nystagmus, the rapidly jerking eyes. And if you want to work out the kind of frame thing, just imagine there's a propeller pointing at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
as the next frame comes up, the propeller tries to get back to 12 o'clock, but it makes it only to, let's say, 11 o'clock.
Yes.
And then the next frame, 10 o'clock. It appears to be going backwards because it's not coinciding with the frames. And if the frame is exactly the same frequency as the propeller, it'll appear to be absolutely motionless. And on YouTube, there's some videos of helicopters apparently having a motionless rotor because the frame rate's exactly the same. Wow.
That's a characteristically brilliant answer. I kind of zoned out would be the wrong way of putting it. I was a bit blinded by science about 2/3 of the way through.
Okay.
So from Richard's point of view, do you think it's almost impossible that he's seen this happening with wheels not on film?
Yes.
Yes, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that. So do I now, but there it is. So, marks out of 10 for my answer?
No, we're looking at a mid-7, I think. I think you had it absolutely right, bar the fact that it's not your eyes that do it. It's about
the flipping camera, isn't it? It's the flipping camera. Yeah, there it is. Qualifications?
For the time being, I'm Professor of Public Understanding at the University of Brighton.
Why for the time being?
Brighton's been in the news recently, my good chap, and we've had there's blood on the floor, I'm afraid to say, that we're having some redundancies. And
are you moving on?
Yes, it would appear so.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but you know that you're brilliant and you'll bounce back and find a new berth imminently, Professor.
It is. I'm very stoic about it, and it's quite exciting. I've been here for 28 years, so there's a lot going on.
Well, I wish you all the very best, and you will never be redundant in Mystery Hour, Hal.
Well, that's a lovely thing to say, James.
Well, I'm glad you think so. I'm sorry to hear your news. I should perhaps have been across it sooner. So you take care and enjoy in the meantime your the first round of applause of the day, but it's about Hal's millionth. And there it is. Have you got a board game, Hal?
I haven't, no.
Well, you've just moved into the lead for this for this week's competition. Although I can't, obviously, who knows where it will end? Who knows? It's coming up to 12:30, so we've still got the champagne question, the hairy moles, the smelly armpits. This sounds like a punk festival, doesn't it? The hairy moles, the smelly armpits, and the rats and mice, the rats and the mice. Yeah, there it is. It's a blooming punk. And speaking of punk, I just want to pay a little brief tribute, if I may, to Jamie Reid, who's a brilliant artist. You'll be familiar with his work, his collage work for the Sex Pistols, the God Save the Queen album cover for the Sex Pistols being possibly his most famous image. But he passed away yesterday. It was announced, and it suddenly occurred to me that having just listed questions that sound very like the lineup at a punk festival, it would be quite a good moment to hope that Jamie Reid rests in peace. 76 years old. A lovely obituary in The Guardian today that you might want to read. Artist and graphic designer whose work for the Sex Pistols was a central pillar of the punk aesthetic. 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 12:33. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour continues. I'll remind you of the questions that still need answers in a minute, but let's crack on first. Terry's in Bexley. Terry, question or answer?
It's a question, James. It's something that keeps me awake at night wondering, and you can probably cast some light on this. It relates to your good self. Now, the O as in O'Brien,
yes.
My Irish neighbour tells me it's to express surprise. Now, I'm not sure that...
He's yanking your chain, as I'm sure you know.
Well, I wondered...
I love that.
It does seem to be only from Ireland, and I'm curious. I'm sure you know the answer to this, but when he told me it was to express surprise, I thought, yes, that's hilarious, but how can that be true? But then... he's from Waterford, and they've got great sense of humour there, and I guess maybe it could be true.
Well, you've opened a minefield, actually, or rather, you've opened a Pandora's box. You can't open a minefield because, I mean, there's a colonial element to this conversation. There's controversy. It wasn't originally. I know this. The answer basically is descendant of. So both O and Mac. Both denote, for Irish people, both denote descendant of. So
I see.
It would be so for Brian's. It's usually believed to be Brian Boru, who was a sort of king of Ireland, but it would be clan leaders. So O'Neill, O'Keefe, O'Shaughnessy, all of those. But originally, it wouldn't have been an apostrophe. I can't. I do know the name of what it would have been. It was a sort of little mark above the O. Do you see what I mean?
I do.
Farda. I think it's a Farda. F-A-D-A. And when the English started killing us all for fun, they wanted to change our names. They wanted to anglicise our names, so they got rid of the Farda, and they often got rid of the Mac. But some of us kept an apostrophe instead. So the apostrophe is best understood as an anglicised Farda. And yet, to answer your original question, the O is descendant of.
Well, that seems the description you've got is obviously correct, but it seems a bit dark and a bit sad. So I'm happier to continue to think it means to express surprise.
Well, then you'd need an H rather than an apostrophe, which is
because it's a silent H, isn't it?
It's also a name I go by occasionally. It's not. I mean, the bit about the anglicisation and the colonial oppression is sad, but the bit about descendant of, denoting descendant of, isn't sad. So you
that's
can,
nice.
And it's the same for app in Wales. So app Gwynedd would be. So you live and learn, eh? I like
I've
that.
learned something today.
And I've got my first round of applause. Thank you, Terry.
You're very welcome.
Lovely stuff. 12:37.
Okay.
Cheers, Terry. Take care. James is in Brentwood. James, what would you like to say? I mean, question or answer. I got confused because Terry was still talking. I never get that wrong. I've got question or answer. James.
Answer, please.
Carry on.
To the mice and rats.
Yes.
Generally, they won't be in the same area, but they can infest the same building.
Go on, tell me more.
So, for example, you could have rats underneath your kitchen cupboards, and you could get mice in your loft. But generally, you don't get them in the same area because the rats will eat the mice.
It's that simple. So it's not like the mice keep the rats away. It's that the rats eat the mice.
Yeah, that's essentially the long and short of it.
So on Louise's French campsite where there were lots of mice, just the rats hadn't turned up.
Pretty much, yeah.
And they probably wouldn't because, I mean, all you need, because there's no permanent residences there. So rats are going to be either in a building or near a railway line or a river, or, I mean, what are you looking at? I presume you're in pest control, are you, James?
Yeah, I've just set up on my own this year, actually, but I've been doing it for 5 years.
All right, I'll give you an advert in a minute if you want one. But in the meantime, what are we looking? So, a rat? Do they want different habitats?
So a rat will need a higher amount of water, so they need more water than they do food, whereas mice can actually survive without water as long as the food content's above 16% moisture.
That's a great answer, and that does explain why you would not have them in Louise's campsite. The rats.
Unless there's a water source around.
Unless there was a pond or a lake nearby, in which case
and that's
why very often you see rats near watercourses, near canals. And
exactly that. Yeah.
Qualifications?
I've got a bachelor's in environmental science and a master's in post-harvest technology.
Post-harvest technology?
Yeah, it's essentially just like food security, global logistics of food security.
Fantastic. What's the business called?
Mitchell Environmental Solutions.
Mitchell Environmental Solutions. And how's it going?
It's going all right, actually. Yeah. I've still got room for a lot more work.
Of course you have. Well, hopefully we'll push some your way. And you're based in Brentwood, are you?
Yeah, I cover Essex and London.
So if you're looking for someone to advise on pest control in general, I mean, what do you do? Do you do everything? Mice, rats, foxes, squirrels?
Yeah, mice, rats, foxes, moths, wasps, bees, beetles, birds.
Squirrels?
All sorts. Squirrels, yeah. I've had a few squirrel jobs.
I'm sorry. I've had a lot of experience with pest control. You know, I've had bees.
Because you live in London, innit?
Well, yeah, but no, the bees was bees was in a sort of outbuilding.
Oh, okay.
Foxes.
Yeah, there's rats. A lot of foxes around. I quite like foxes. They keep the rats away.
Do you think foxes do keep rats away? Is that a thing?
They will actively hunt them. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Bees. Squirrels in the loft, that's a weird one because you think you've got no idea. That noise is bizarre, right? And then they'll come back again. They'll nibble their way back in again if you're not careful. They can do all sorts of damage.
Yeah, their teeth are actually strong enough to chew through concrete and steel. Same for mice and rats.
You know your stuff. I think that's my lot. What's the most exotic thing you've been called out for or unexpected?
Probably a gecko. But don't tend to get geckos over here.
But why would that be a pest, or was it just lost and they wanted your help in finding it?
It was at a supermarket where I used to work, and they just probably, I think they changed something to do with the fumigation process of their vegetation, their veggies, and it just kind of
an escaped gecko came in. Well, it'd probably come in on the produce, had it?
Yeah. I think it was on the bananas.
Well, you live and learn, eh?
You get lots of spiders and things coming in on bananas as well, but that gets a little bit hairy.
Have you got a website?
Yeah, it's mitchellenvironmentalsolutions.co.uk.
There you go.
It's pretty basic.
No, mate, you don't want to mess around with that. You don't want to be faffing about with it. You've got an environmental problem. It needs a solution. Mitchell's your man. mitchellenvironmentalsolutions.co.uk. There you go.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I wish you well with that, James. I really do.
Too.
You take care.
Thank you very much.
And good luck.
Bye-bye.
12:41 is the time. 034. So if you're in, Essex or London, and you just think, I need one of those. I just wanted someone over there. There you go. Get yourself on there now. Ross is in Melrose. Ross, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Okay, bit background. Remember back in the winter time when we were looking cost of living crisis, being told to maybe turn the thermostat down a degree or two.
Yes.
In glorious times, I like a 21. Living the dream.
Yeah.
But I maybe get it down to 19. But that's as far as I was willing to go. I don't think I'd go down to 18.
Right.
However, it was 18 degrees in Scotland yesterday, and there's people wandering about with their tops off.
Yeah.
So why does temperature feel different when it's the same?
Well, it's probably not, is it?
Well, I mean, it is if you look at a thermostat or a thermometer.
Yeah, but it's probably not the same, if you see what I mean.
Nope.
Well, nor do I actually, but it can't. But it can't be, can it?
Well, hence why I'm phoning you. I don't want to Google it, but even at 19 or 20 degrees in the winter, you'd have a jumper on, maybe your house gilet. But it's 18 degrees here today, and I'm in shorts and sleeves rolled up. So
yeah, all right.
It's the same temperature.
Yeah. So in your house, that degree centigrade would be quite cold, but when you're out and about, it's quite hot. What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that question. I thank you. I'll try and get an answer, Ross. That's the point, isn't it? 03456060973 if you know the answer to that. Fodder, I'm being told, is how I should have pronounced that. I did so well on that answer about O's and Irish names as well, but fodder. I don't have any Irish at all. The only Irish phrases I know are rude, and I can't say them on the radio. 12:43 is the time. Cindy's in Alicante. That's the second Spanish caller of the hour. Question or answer, Cindy?
Question, James.
Carry on.
Okay, so I've got quite long hair.
Right.
And the hair that's still attached to my head, when it touches my shoulder, doesn't irritate me.
Yeah.
But as soon as the hair becomes loose and it lands on my shoulder, I have to get rid of it. It's like having a mosquito or a fly or something land on me.
Yeah. But
yes?
No, I'm just thinking. I'm never presumptuous enough to come in quickly on it. But you never have a lone hair resting on your shoulder, do you?
I do, yes.
No, you don't.
Yes.
Don't be silly.
I do. If the hair becomes loose. Of course I do. If the hair becomes loose, it just sticks to my skin.
No, I don't know. I mean a lone attached hair.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Well, do you think that would be the difference?
Yeah. Absolutely certain of it.
If it's a lot of hair, it wouldn't irritate me.
Well, because it's not got the like a feather. So a lone unattached hair is tickling you like a feather, isn't it? But if it was a sort of ponytail type scenario, then it's not going to tickle you like a feather. It's too heavy to do that tickling type thing.
I don't know, but
this is a brilliant answer. It is. Well, no, it's not. It is actually tickling. It's just perhaps a different kind because the hair is a bit different texture to the feather. But it's the lightness of the individual unattached hair that is causing the irritation. And if it was still attached to your head, then it would not be. If you could somehow, I don't know if you want to do this now. If you could somehow separate a single hair still attached to your head.
Yeah.
Just a single one, and then sort of tickle your shoulder with it, then I bet you get the same sort of effect. What's happened now? I think you've dropped your phone because you're trying to pick a hair out the side of your head.
What?
No, phone's gone funny. I think I've answered your question, but I will respectfully leave it on the board. Why is a single hair? Well, I think it is that, but we lost the phone line then. I hope that wasn't my fault for asking her to contort herself in pursuit of a single hair. 12:45 is the time.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It's 12:49 already. Questions that still need answers include why we drink champagne when we're celebrating. I thought this one would be quite easy. Even if I got it right, I've left it on the board so you can ring in and get the round of applause and, of course, entry into the competition to win a Mystery Hour board game. But why do hairs grow out of moles? Why is the part of your skin where a mole is hairier than the rest of it? That's for John in Croydon. Harry wants to know why one armpit is smellier than the other in the morning. Again, I think it's probably because he's laying on one side. But if anyone, what qualifications would you need to go definitive on that? That one may stay unanswered. Why the temperature, when they say it's 18 degrees outside and you think, I won't take a coat. But then when it's cold inside and you turn your thermostat on, 18 degrees wouldn't touch the sides. What's going on there? And Cindy's hair. Why does a lone hair irritate her, but a hair still attached to her head does not? Well, we'll find out. Paul's in Swansea. Paul, question or answer?
It's answer.
Carry on.
Champagne is linked to a celebration because the French kings were coronated in Reims back in the 12th century.
Right.
And they invited the British aristocrats and kings. And then they thought, this is quite nice. So they imported it back to the UK. And then that's why it was linked to celebration.
Well, that's a lovely answer. In fact, probably not even importing it back to the UK, but for quite a long period of time, the links between the English monarchy and the French monarchy were so close that they'd have just done the same thing. They'd have said, "Well, we must have champagne. We are celebrating."
That's it. That's the answer.
So they did it. Qualifications?
I've worked in hospitality all my working life, and I went to many champagne tasting sessions. And the salesman for Veuve Clicquot said, it should not be linked to celebration, but an everyday drink. So I said to him, why was it linked to celebrations? And then that's what he told me.
That's interesting. It's sound business sense from your Veuve Clicquot fella, isn't it? Because the last thing you want is to be flogging something that you only have on high days and holidays.
Exactly.
And they did. That is a lovely answer, Paul. It's got you a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I'll remember that as well now, because that is one of those things that can pop up in all sorts. What did I say it was? Just the cost. So I was completely wrong. Not for the first time, and almost certainly not for the last. Completely wrong. And indeed, as as James, who asked the question, pointed out, it's not the most expensive. You could drop, you get a bottle of champagne for 50 quid. You can get a bottle of normal wine, non-fizzy wine, for 200 quid or 2,000 quid. Thank you, Paul. Steve's in Basingstoke. Steve, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Right, I'm answering the question about why it feels hotter outside than in your own home. Sometimes. So, and the answer is quite simple. If it's a bright day outside, you've got the sun's radiant heat that warms you up. Yes. And the radiant temperature can be significantly higher than the air temperature.
Right.
And so there are two different types of temperature.
But when they say that today it's 18 degrees outside, what are they taking there? What?
That's what we call the dry bulb temperature. So it's the air temperature rather than the radiant heat that's striking.
No, I understand that, but then I come into my house and I set my thermostat to 18, and I'm not warm at all.
That's right, because you've lost that radiant heat from the sun, and it's just the air temperature you're feeling.
So even though it's 18 outside and 18 inside, it's just the sun that's making the difference.
It is, yes. Yeah, it's the radiant heat from the sun that's striking you. So you can even feel hot. It could be T-shirt weather on a brisk, cold day if the sun is shining brightly.
Okay. I think I understand. So it could be 18 without much sun and you'd feel cold outside.
That's right.
Okay.
It could feel very cold outside. In fact, it can feel colder than 18 with a wind chill.
Yeah.
But the air temperature, you can feel hot with the same air temperature or cold even.
Qualifications?
Well, I've run a small business called Window Treat, and it's we're like doctors for glass. So many of my customers suffer from overheating behind glass. It's making the commercial environment's home is more comfortable, either too cold, too hot, whatever it might be.
Cool.
So we solved the puzzle for them.
Round of applause for Steve. 12:54 is the time. George is in Torquay. George, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Sweaty armpits are. I used to be, many years ago, the secretary of the West Country Arm Wrestling Association. We used to put on events at various regattas and fetes.
Yes.
And it became evident to me that the amount of perspiration generated by armpits during the course of a contest could cause an atrocious amount of sweat and smell.
Yes.
I mean, if you've ever seen an event, competition, you'll notice that the two contestants usually avert their heads away from the union of their two arms, simply because of the enormous stink.
It's not because of the enormous stink.
Oh, it is. They grimace. They grimace partly because of the
they're not grimacing
physics.
because of the smell, George. I mean, you could deodorise before a competition, couldn't you?
Well,
also, it's stale
sweat. They put chalk on their hands,
They
but
do.
they don't
Could
seem
put a
to.
bit of chalk on their armpits. It's stale sweat that smells, and you're in the middle of a bout. Is the bout the correct terminology, George?
But you have to remember that these events go on for quite a while.
Yeah, but it's fresh sweat, mate. It's gushing, fresh sweat gushing from the pits.
We're talking about the West Country, my friend.
What's the longest bout you can remember?
Oh, these things could. I mean, if you at the primary stage to the final could be about 2 hours.
But the longest individual contest, is there a time limit? I mean, is it always to the death?
The best of three.
But is it always to the death, though? You're never going to get like a stalemate where the referee goes.
You had some times where they couldn't prevail, so they would
an impasse.
They would put that down as a draw and do deciding. I'm fascinated by your history and arm wrestling etiquette in general. Well, I've never taken part in arm wrestling myself.
You were just secretary of the association.
Well, I'm 5'2" and about, I'm only 5'2" and 7.5 stone.
You sound a lot bigger.
And I can assure you that my armpits are absolutely pristine.
I'm very glad. How did you get into that role then, if you had no personal involvement in the sport?
Well, the same way that a coxswain gets to be on a rowing boat, I suppose.
Sort of, yes. I don't think you've provided us with an answer to the question of why one armpit would be smellier than another, though, after a night's sleep.
Simply because that's the armpit that's engaging in the physical effort. So I would suspect.
He's been asleep. He's asleep.
Right-handed.
He's asleep. He's not engaging in any physical effort. And remember, this is a family programme before you start exploring other possible theories.
I wasn't about to do that.
Yeah, but you laughed first, so I win. He's asleep. There's no physical activities at all.
Right. I had missed that point.
Yeah.
But I still maintain that the arm, your right arm, which you use mostly, will create more perspiration and hence more sweat.
I thank you. I'm not going to give you a round of applause, especially not now. I know you're only 5'7". I was quite intimidated earlier because your voice is so deep, but I'm a lot happier now. So no chance. There's nothing there that explains why Harry's left armpit smells worse than his right armpit. Are you going to write your memoirs, George?
I doubt it. It's just another one of my failed theories of life, I suppose.
It's just one chapter, mate. I wouldn't put yourself down. I'd love to know more. Thank you, George. Paul's in Wexford. Question or answer?
Clarification, James.
Carry on, Paul.
In the Irish language, you're partially correct when you talk about your name being O'Brien.
Yes.
Being of the family of Brian.
Yes.
But the Mac is actually the son of.
Oh, is it? It specifies a male
son or daughter.
Of the line.
Yeah. So you would have Mac for son, and then you would have Nick, N-I-C,
yeah.
if it was the daughter of.
Okay.
So if you see somebody who's Mac Sweeney, and like we would just use Mac Sweeney in the anglicised version most of the time, but in Irish it would be Mock Sivnock, meaning the son of Sweeney, but it would also be Nick Sivnock, meaning the daughter of Sweeney.
Oh.
So it clarifies kind of male or female. In terms of son or daughter of the clan of Sweeney,
and the O just means of.
The O means of the clan,
right? Not the child of the direct child.
Not the child of. No, it's not the child of. It's just of the clan of Brian.
Whereabouts in Wexford are you?
Just outside Wexford town.
Lovely. Qualifications.
Southeast. Proud Irishman and European.
That'll do nicely. Round of applause for Paul. And how do you pronounce that little diacritic mark above the O before the apostrophe?
It's fodder, and what it does is elongates the vowel.
Oh, not obrien.
No,
so O.
It elongates the vowel.
It's why
So
I'm a
called a
Fogarty,
fodder.
not a Fogarty.
That's why she's a Fogarty, not a Fogarty.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Round of applause. He had his round of applause. Well done, Paul. Yeah. There we go.
No
Have another
problem.
one.
Okay.
Lovely stuff.
Enjoy the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad someone does. Crikey, I'm spoilt for choice today, but I'm going to have to give the mystery hour ball going to Professor Howell because he shared that sad news about his tenure at Brighton University coming to a close. But it could have been Paul. It could have been, I guess James got a free advert, didn't he, for his Mitchell Environmental Services. It could have been almost anyone this week. It was a vintage mystery hour, which is appropriate because the second question was about champagne. Vintage? No? All right. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, Rewind Live Radio, or enjoy the whole show podcast. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts, including the Self-Contained Mystery Hour podcast. So there's loads of these that you can listen to in isolation. Rewind Live Radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Ben Kentish with you at 4, standing in for Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Faux Not For a good tea.
Exactly.
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 Tea.